across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. It's heading to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Lots to talk about. Quiet news week, folks. Don't get any of those anymore. I think we've agreed now over the last few years. None of those happen anymore. But whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it's absolutely fantastic having your company today. Lots to talk about, as I say, and if you do miss anything from the show, if you missed anything from yesterday's show, have a look at my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. I know, how did we come up with that? Hit subscribe and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, of course, going to discuss Donald Trump promising the war in Iran could end very soon. HMS Dragon is finally, in a couple of days, not yet, going to set sail for Cyprus. Of course, it'll take it the best part of a week to get there. I mean, we're really showing our strength, aren't we, on this issue? Plus, absolutely crucially, that finally that announcement yesterday, fears over free speech in Britain as Labour has defined Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hatred, and announced its first anti-Muslim hostility czar. But how much is this going to actually affect our ability to talk openly and honestly, based on facts, about the very real threat that we do have in this country of, well, let's face it, community cohesion absolutely breaking down in many of our towns and cities, and indeed the threat of Islamist attacks on our nation, given that the vast majority of terror attacks and deaths from terror attacks are from Islamists in this country. Will we be able to say that anymore? Well, we'll talk about that later on. Plus, we're also going to be talking about those household bills, whether it's your driving costs, your energy bills, whether it's your mortgage, you name it, whether it's your taxes going up. How's the government going to help? This after the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, yesterday said that there would be some help from the government. Well, we'll see if that does come. Well, all of that coming up, plenty more besides. I'd love to hear from you on the two biggest issues today. In particular, Donald Trump saying the Iran war will end very soon. I mean, he said various different things. He's going to, bring death, fire and fury down on Iran over the oil tankers being stopped in the Strait of Hormuz. He seems to think they have not yet already been stopped. They have. But he says the Iran war will end very soon. They're ahead of schedule. This, as we're already seeing those bills mount. Yeah. The price of a barrel of oil went up to $120, now back around the $90 mark, but it's still big worries that it could continue to go up again. It's going to affect the price of pretty much everything we do and everything we buy, and it's going to affect things like our interest rates, our inflation rate and others here in the UK. The government says they're going to promise some help if we need it. Remember that freeze on bills we had back in 2022. But what's your reaction to that? This is how it actually affects us here back at home. Also love to hear your thoughts about this new anti-Muslim hostility czar, this new definition of Islamophobia, and this urge to have, more cohesion in our communities, which apparently involves both sides, newcomers, and the people already here basically working together. But why is there any onus on people who are already in this country to adapt in any way to people who come here? Shouldn't it be entirely the other way around? I mean, when in Rome used to be a phrase we used. Apparently, when in Britain, you can do what you sodding well want. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Now, the number to call, whatever you want to say, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text costs £1 standard network rate message. Delighted to say, joining me today is journalist and political commentator Henry Hill. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Lots to talk about at home and abroad. Where do we even start?
Where would you like to start?
I'd like to say that, interestingly, those two big stories, very much related. Who has been funding the Islamist element of problems we've had in this country? Iran. They are the problem. Who is causing the problems we've got right now in terms of the price of oil and everything? Iran. I mean, you can say, America taking on Iran. Iran is a threat to world peace. Iran needs to be taken on, is my view. Sooner or later, Iran releasing a nuclear weapon in the Middle East would probably be more of an issue in the future than what is going on now. But let's start with Donald Trump saying various different speeches, very different statements, various different posts on Truth Social. The Iran war will end very soon. We're already ahead of schedule. We've won, but we haven't won enough. and then threatening to bring death, fire and fury down on Iran if they continue to stop oil tankers using the Strait of Hormuz. Is the war almost over?
I mean, who knows? This is one of the things about Donald Trump, is that he'll simply say sort of 3 or 4 different, slightly Delphic statements, and one of them will turn out to be true. I don't think anyone, including him, knows which one it is at the time. Because his argument is, you know, we're doing phenomenally well and therefore we can end the war. On the other hand, we aren't necessarily doing as well as we need to have been, so we can't end the war yet. He's furious about Iran threatening, as you say, the critical global oil choke point in the Strait of Hormuz. I think that the challenge for Donald Trump is that his coalition, his voter coalition, hates this stuff, right? Like, he was supposed to be the big Republican turn away from the neocon era, and that was very popular.
Every single American president has been elected on an isolationist basis. Everyone. The only one who actually was Obama, and that was a disaster.
I mean, I think the thing is, you know, once you have all of these global commitments, you know, historically, actually, you know, 100 years ago, America just was very isolationist. But every president since then who's tried to go back to it has realised that, sadly, I suppose, they've become a global superpower. And actually, if you step back, no one else is really able to step into that breach.
Well, no. The issue is when America steps back, someone else does step in. It's Russia or it's China. Call me old-fashioned. I don't care how much you got a problem with Donald Trump, how much you got trouble with America. I choose America every time.
From the West, I would have said, not in the same way.
Yeah, we're not up to it. Although apparently the French are rather more up to it than we are, with sending. I mean, this is amazing stuff. They're sending 8 warships. They're deploying 8 frigates, more than the entire British fleet possesses. As well as 2 amphibious helicopter carriers and their flagship aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle to the Med to help protect Cyprus. We haven't even got anything out there yet. This is a national humiliation.
It is. It is absolutely extraordinary what's happened to the Royal Navy presence, especially because we've got, for historical reasons, on paper, a fairly good position. We've got a naval base in Bahrain, actually, but with no ships in it.
Now, again, I'm no expert, but I think I'm no expert at the floor.
I know. I feel like I always, you know, when you're hesitant to second-guess subject matter experts and generals and admirals and that sort of thing. But nonetheless, I, as a civilian, who might be wrong, think that a naval base is best served by having ships.
Should we do a public question on that? Do you think it would be better, on balance, for your... But this is the thing. This is where we're at, and this has exposed the reality. And again, I don't think we can only blame Keir Starmer for this. I think, you know, and the current defence chiefs. Again, you know, this has been going on for years. We had those cuts by 1/3 in defence spending under Cameron and Osborne. This whole, you know, peace dividend, and again, austerity. There was no money. The trouble is, defence spending is something that it costs a heck of a lot of money, and if it really works, you never have to use it.
Well, exactly. It looks redundant, but actually, it goes back a bit further than austerity. This is the important thing. So, there was an order of frigates in 1996. And then I think that the next order of frigates was at some point in the 2010s. And then the next one was in the early 2020s. So there was a very, very long period from 1996, all through the New Labour years, they didn't order any new frigates, right?
Well, then that was the post-Cold War peace dividend period. People thought, well, that's it, you know, life's changed.
Well, I suppose, but the thing is, nobody formally said we're not going to need any more. And everyone sort of looked on paper, because at the time, the surface fleet was quite all right. But they just didn't account for what would happen when these ships started retiring. And the other problem with the British Navy is that they keep getting because they need to keep up with the Americans. And so they go for the ultra-expensive ship with all the bells and whistles. But that means that every generation of ships has half the number of actual vessels in it. And that means I
think we're seeing the basic problem. I mean, look, you know, we've got the French are helping us out. Thanks, Macron. I mean, God, that hurt. That really hurt to say. It really, really... Oh, Emmanuel, when we're having to rely on you to protect our military bases. Look, you know, we're finally... You know, HMS Dragon's finally going to set sail in the next couple of days, so that'll be 5, and it'll take a week to get there. I mean, frankly, the war may well be over. We've got, of course, the impact, and we discussed a lot on the show yesterday about, you know, this impact on people back home. Because, look, we're seeing the impact on people living in the Middle East, particularly in Israel and in Iran, of these weapons raining down on them and deaths, civilian deaths absolutely included. But, you know, back here at home and across the world, people are feeling the cost of that oil price surge. You know, it's going to affect your petrol prices, your diesel prices at the pumps. It's affecting heating your home, putting the lights on. It's affecting everything that is transported to you, everything you buy. I mean, this is going big. We're talking, and the Chancellor Rachel Reeves yesterday saying, you know, we've got inflation currently at 3%. You know, 50% above where it should be at 2%. and looking at it going possibly to 5% if this carries on because of that huge inflationary cost. We've got Trump threatening, Iran if they basically continue to stop oil tankers using the Strait of Hormuz, where there's this tiny little bit, isn't it? All the oil pretty much in the Middle East comes out is on the eastern side of that strait, that Gulf, and then it all comes down through there. A fifth of the world's oil and gas comes out of there. And if it's closed down, now the French are saying we're going to go and send, aircraft carriers, we're going to go and protect that so ships can go. But a lot of it just comes down to insurance. Basically, you've got a multi-million-pound ship, an oil tank or whatever, and the insurance company go, nah, we are not going to insure you going through there. End of. Full stop. And so they're just stopping production, they're stopping transportation. That's when things are going to get very, very nasty.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're America and you've got this vast defence budget at this point, you might end up just having to spend some of it offering to underwrite the ships to get them through.
There was some talk of them doing that, wasn't there?
I mean,
but even Donald Trump's comments overnight has helped bring the oil price down. It's going to be over soon, don't worry.
Which you'd hope. But the challenge, of course, is that, one, oil tankers are very big and very slow, and also quite explodey.
That's a technical military term. That is a technical military term. Quite explodey.
Got off a flight yesterday, apologies.
I'm sorry, that's the best description I've heard.
But also, historically, you'd have needed some kind of big artillery system in order to hit them, right? Which is actually relatively easy for Western military to take on. We've got excellent air power. Yeah. Nowadays, you can do it with a drone. Right, we saw this with the Houthis actually in the Red Sea. They are a militia essentially, but they have land missiles, very portable, that can hit and sink a trade ship, and a big American battle group on the sea doesn't actually stop them.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, that impact, isn't it? How damaging do you think this is going to end up being for Keir Starmer? I mean, the polls are suggesting, people are very much opposed to this war. I'm sorry, I'm of the view, again, with people who go, I'm anti-war. Well, great. Yeah, everyone could be anti-war. You could be anti-war in 1938, 1939, can't you? Doesn't mean war's not coming for you. The whole point, I mean, amazing thing, Nick Robinson on Radio 4 this morning saying, but, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has been dreaming about war with Iran for years. Like, dreaming about? No, understanding the existential threat that this country that says, this regime that says, our main aim in life is to annihilate Israel and kill everyone in it, and then go for that's the little Satan, and then the other little Satan, us, and then the big Satan, America. They said it, it does exactly what it says on the tin, the Tehran regime. That's their aim in life. Terror plots here and they're like, I'm sorry, but people talking about the economic cost, and we discussed this on the show yesterday. The oil price spike, and Trump saying it's a small price to pay. He's a multi-millionaire. It's okay for him. Other people who are struggling every day, I understand. However, Tehran getting a nuclear weapon, Tehran using that nuclear weapon or holding that over the Middle East so no action ever be taken against them, as they basically fund terror networks across the Middle East. And yes, here in Europe and here in Britain, 20 foiled Iranian-backed terror attacks in recent years have been foiled here. Some not foiled, by the way. I'm sorry, but that is going to cost us a heck of a lot more. This is a threat that needs to be dealt with. This is, as a guest from Jerusalem said on my show yesterday, this is the modern day Hitler in terms of the Iranian regime, and they've got to be dealt with. And it is a price that is going to have to be paid, because otherwise the price in the future is going to be so much worse.
Well, I think what Iran is desperately hoping for is that if it can get a nuclear bomb, it ends up under the nuclear umbrella, and essentially it becomes impossible to deal with them. And this is a regime, as you say, which, even if you disregard the sort of idea of a direct threat to Britain, which you shouldn't, just look at the way it's conducted itself amongst its near neighbours, right? It explicitly just sets up networks of virulently anti-Semitic militias in all of Israel's neighbours, right? It backed the Assad regime in Syria to prosecute its own civilians as well. But I think the other thing is that there's no real benefit to sitting out, right, because of the way that the damage is happening. Ted Heath, when he didn't join in the Middle East in the 70s, he actually got Britain exempted from the oil embargo, right? And so, but
there was a benefit.
Here, Iran is not proposing to let British ships through the Strait of Hormuz, right? And so if we don't get involved, the economic impact is absolutely no different to if we do get involved.
I don't think the Americans really needed us. Doesn't sound like we could be much use, but it does seem that we have damaged that relationship.
Of course we have.
But the Prime Minister's, he's a very unpopular Prime Minister. I don't know if his poll ratings could go down much further than they already have. I mean, the diehards who are still standing by him surely are just going to stay standing by him. But by this role where he's basically slitting out. A lot of people saying that's a popular move, but we can sit out. But when household bills go up and you can't get a mortgage and you can't pay your energy bills again, or let's face it, and taxes go up to pay for the extra government spending, etc., and the government debt, interest payments, he's gonna take the hit anyway. Same as Donald Trump is.
I mean, exactly. And the thing is, all this talk about we need to protect British people from the impact of an oil war in the Middle East. Fine, we've got the North Sea.
Yeah.
Let's have a big old U-turn on the North Sea.
Don't even.
Please.
Right? It's so painful.
What about shale gas fracking? Like Britain could still. This is the thing a lot of people don't think. Look at Norway, right? Norway. Whenever we hear about the North Sea's dead and done, Norway's drilling the same gas fields that we could be drilling.
Literally joined
up. Britain could be an energy exporter, right? And that could mean either lower bills.
But Ed Miliband keeps saying, but it's still our market is still completely based on the international market, and yet our bills are so much higher than everyone else's. So that simply doesn't make sense.
Well, part of the reason for that is that we put so many taxes on them.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Look, so much to talk about, and we covered a lot of this, and I think we will for many weeks. But I also want to talk about that big announcement yesterday, leaked last week. But this basic, cohesion document, this which is basically trying to sort of tackle what they call, the breakdown of social cohesion and the issue of anti-Muslim hostility. This is what they call a major crackdown on Islamophobia, and they announced an official definition of anti-Muslim hostility because there's been lots of outcry about this term Islamophobia. All of the people that they have supposedly consulted or basically have got organisations with links to extremism. Big concern there. They're going to appoint an anti-Muslim hostility czar to tackle it. They're going to spend £4 million in total on trying to tackle this issue. £4 million over a huge country, frankly, it's chicken feed. It's not going to do anything. But basically, they're going to define anti-Muslim hostility as crimes such as violence or harassment directed at people who are either Muslim or perceived to be, as well as prejudicial stereotyping to encourage hatred against them and unlawful discrimination. Now, nobody should be shouted at, attacked, threatened, treated differently because they are clearly Muslim, where their appearance or their behaviour or whatever, that's absolutely unacceptable. We have freedom of religious worship in this country. However, a lot of concerns, and we spoke to Toby Young from the Free Speech Union yesterday about this, a lot of concerns about how this could impact our ability to have a reasonable discussion about issues which does involve the Muslim community. And the funny thing I find about this is the government talks constantly about the Muslim community and Muslim community leaders and how we have to consult them and all this. And yet, one of the things about this is that you're not supposed to treat Muslims as if they've all got one identity. I've been saying for years, there's no middle-class white woman atheist identity. There's no community leader for me. Why do they think that every Muslim has got the same views, or every black community leaders? Why would every black person? Why would someone who's been born in this country 3 generations on, or someone who's from the Caribbean, or someone who's from Nigeria have the same views? Or share the same cultural viewpoints? I mean, this is nonsense. So the government, in doing this, creates exactly the same idea, this monolithic idea of Muslimness, and then say, but you mustn't talk about that.
It is absolutely. I mean, I sort of just viscerally hate this modern tendency to deal with everything in terms of communities, right? They're citizens, right?
We're individuals.
We're individuals, but we're also citizens of a common community, the national community. And when we insist on treating people as if actually, no, they're this particular characteristic and that makes them a block, that's a real testament to the failure of integration, if indeed it's worth doing. But the other thing about this is, well, one of the many things, they're not actually making it law, right? So this is a government that is scrapping non-crime hate incidents because
they're not a law.
Well, no, exactly right. This is the thing. They're scrapping non-crime hate incidents because they have finally realised that it is basically sucking up lots of police resources, recording things which are not crimes, and now they are proposing at the same time to set up this bureaucracy that will start investigating things which, again, are not crimes because we already have crimes against hate speech in this country, right?
If you attack someone or you verbally threaten somebody because of their religion, that is already against the law,
right?
And quite rightly so.
Exactly. So this whole thing is, I think, if we're honest, a sop. Labour is worried about losing ground with Muslim voters. We saw it at the last general election. To the Greens, but also to the independents who took several seats last time. And I think that's where this has come from. They are hoping that creating this czar with its £4 million budget will assuage.
Why don't they go the whole way and
voters.
just create the blasphemy law, which we de facto already have anyway?
Well, because they don't want to do it formally, because formally, if you're a progressive, you can't have a blasphemy.
But the thing is, you say, like, no, scrapping of non-crime hate incidents. I mean, that's what a lot of this will end up being, won't it? But but the key thing here is that we had two happened to be both women, Tory Home Secretaries, who tried to scrap them. They weren't able to because they're just a creation of the College of Policing, who are completely and utterly captured organisation and needs to be shut down tomorrow for the sake of this country's basic, law and order and criminal justice system. But this is the thing, so they're not going to be able to do that. But this is, even if it's not the law, I've had lots of WhatsApp groups, people are discussing this, and the thing is, oh, it's not the law, it's not the law. Well, there's loads of things that aren't the law. I mean, Maya Forstetter proved the fact that she was allowed to say quite clearly that men can't become women and trans women are not women in a tweet when she in her workplace. But she lost her job as a result of that. Went to tribunal, lost that, appealed and won. We've had case after case after case. Hamit Kuşkun, the Turkish guy who set fire to a Quran outside the Turkish embassy. One lost one. I mean, we are. Lost one, lost one, won. We are constantly having things which are clearly not against the law, being treated as if they are against the law. And I'm telling you, it's going to have a chilling effect on broadcasters because of Ofcom and in employers, and they take this stuff on and go, well, this is the guidance. As it is, Ofcom, they want, you're not allowed to have a conversation about climate change because that's settled. That's settled. We have complaints about, I'm sorry, it's not settled science. There's no such thing as settled science. We've got the theory of evolution still, by the way. It's not proven. Of course, 99.9999999% think that's what's happened. But that's not science. Ofcom is of the view that saying that a trans woman is not a woman is actually, unacceptable. Well, again, sod you. Don't care. I'll pay the fine myself. I'll crowdsource it. So even though things are blatantly not the law, they have a habit of impacting on people's ability to speak freely, and about things like the largely majority Muslim Pakistani grooming gangs. The discussion of that was shut down for 10 years as it was. People literally lost their ability to speak on social media because of that. This is going to be shut down by this, because having a conversation about why were the perpetrators largely of one particular background and why were the victims largely of another background, why was that happening, what was going on in terms of attitudes by the rapists themselves and also by the authorities that meant that was able to continue for so long. If you can't have that conversation because in some way that will be regarded as anti-Muslim hostility, then you shut down all debate about a mass crime against young girls. Oh no,
I entirely agree with you. I didn't mean to suggest the fact that it wasn't the law meant that it wasn't serious. But it does mean, for example, Labour has bypassed, if you wanted to make this law, it would have to have an awful lot more scrutiny in the House of Commons. For example, you'd have to have a much bigger process. And the other thing is, and you know this because we've seen this every time one of these things gets up, when a bureaucracy like this gets set up, the one thing that everyone who works for it needs to do is justify their own existence. So this will produce an endless stream of alleged evidence of Islamophobia, which will then lead to more demands for more action from Labour as it gets more desperate in the run-up to the general election.
Absolutely. The main issue, of course, though, is that actually we have seen an increase in Islamophobia. There's no doubt at all about that in this country. Well, anti-Muslim hostility, and it's unacceptable. However, when you conflate perfectly legitimate conversations about Islamism, Islamists, about... I don't think there should be sort of mass praying events in the street and the like. I'm sorry, I don't. I think that is just a massive... by any religion, by the way. You've got your places of worship. Thank you. I don't want it... I will defend your right to worship how you want, whatever your religion, but don't impose it on me in the street. I'm sorry. I don't want you knocking on my door about it. I don't want it in the street when I'm trying to drive or walk down it. I think there are issues like that. I think we should be allowed to have those conversations. And again, a lot of the hostility people express towards Muslims, and I think it's completely wrong if you're going to direct it towards a woman who's just got a hijab and walking down the street, minding her own business, going off to go shopping. That's obviously unacceptable. That's the same as people shouting out the N-word at a black person or abuse at a woman just for being a woman. However, there's a reason why a lot of hostility has grown up over recent years, and it is the fact that people have been told, don't talk about it, don't say anything, you're a bad person, you're a bigot if you do say anything. When you talk about the threat of Islamism, extremist religious Muslim views in this country, that have meant that, you know, the Batley Grammar School teacher is still in hiding with his wife and 4 kids. I mean, the fact that kids get blown up at a pop concert, the fact that we've got bollards on every bridge in London to stop people being mown down by lunatics in cars or lorries. I mean, there's a reason why people started feeling hostile towards what they believe were the people who are perpetrating this. Now, ordinary Muslims going about their daily lives are not perpetrating this, but a lot of these so-called Muslim community leaders are very much not speaking out against it. And that is a very big issue. And the more we start treating people as individuals who are, held accountable for their own actions, beliefs, and speech, that will be a much healthier thing.
Of course. And this is, you alluded to it at the beginning, the great irony of this, of course, is that what we really want is to make people who are rightly angry about those issues not blame Muslims en bloc. Do you know what doesn't help with that? If you have somebody who's like, well, I think the grooming gangs are really bad, and somebody's like, you can't say that, mate, that's anti-Muslim.
Exactly.
It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah. Absolutely not. Facts aren't racist, and they're not bigoted. Facts are just facts. Simple as that. So much to talk about. I want to hear your thoughts. Do give us a call on that issue. Do you think that this new Islamophobia definition is going to actually impact on the freedom of speech? Love to hear your thoughts on where we are with the Iran war. Trump says it's going to end very soon. We've been promised some help as our household bills are set to rise if it continues. What's your reaction to that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:31 is the time. Well, we, as usual, you know what I'm like, we go yapping on. Not much time for calls, but I want to squeeze them in. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Derek is in Manchester. Hello, Derek, what do you want to say?
Hello, Julia.
Hello.
It's regarding this Islamophobia business. Well, for a start, a phobia is a fear of something.
Yep. No, it's an irrational fear of something.
Well, irrational or not, it doesn't matter. It's still a fear. And I'm not entitled to be feared of a religion, or a cult, or whatever you want to call it, which has a book which has got a minimum of 100 verses that call Muslims to fight against or slay people who do not adhere to that religion. So I'm quite entitled to be frightened of that, and I'm entitled to voice that opinion, my opinion on it.
Yeah, no, I think that is perfectly fine. I think a lot of people, and again, I include myself in this, we're not as well versed, should we say, in what it actually says in the Quran, but the history of Islam has involved, there was a reason why Islam basically sort of took over, pretty much whole of North Africa and large swathes of Europe, and it was by the power of the sword. We do need to remember that. I mean, again, I think one of the real issues that Islam has never had, its Reformation. It's never had, should we say, its New Testament to move on. But you're saying it's perfectly legitimate, and you're going to still carry on speaking freely?
Well, as I said before, and as you've just mentioned, actually, Islam has dominated countries through the sword. I mean, that's what happened to Iran, and it's still happening now. And the problem of it is, there is over 100 verses in the Quran calling Muslims to fight against idolaters, as they call us, wherever they find them, slay them when the holy months are over. These are all verses out of the Quran. I mean, I could go on forever with them.
Yeah, no, and that's it. People
ought to really check it out, because unless you know what they're dealing with, how on earth can you fight against it?
And again, when people talk about extremist Islamist views, those are simply the strict interpretation of what is in the Quran. Whereas, ordinary Muslims, and again, bearing in mind, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of Muslims who do not live like that. And we do need to make that difference. But again, when people talk about, say, Islamism as being something completely separate from Muslims' teachings, no, I mean, they're basically following the strictest version, interpretation of what the actual, Quranic verses say. Barry, thank you, Derek. Barry's in Norwich. Barry, what do you want to say?
Just Julia, good morning. I was going to comment on this Islamophobia. Yeah, right. Now, these community leaders that you talk about, I would imagine they are imams in mosques. We saw it in Birmingham with the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters, where basically they said they can't come here because the Muslims don't like it. And you had it in, again, with a guy saying this is a Muslim area. We live in the United Kingdom. We don't have areas.
Yep.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Well, imagine if you said this is a white area or this is a Christian area. The police would turn up straight away and take you away.
The problem is, right, I'm free to walk into a church or a cathedral. I'm not religious, but I am free to do that. I can't walk into a mosque.
Can you not?
So you don't? No, you're not. You have to be invited. If you're not a Muslim, you have to be invited into a mosque. You can't just walk in there. Yeah, right. Yeah. So you.
But my view is people are entitled to have those religious. I mean, if that is the case, people are entitled to have that.
You have to be a Muslim. You can't just walk. I mean, I'm not.
No, I remember my daughter going to Regent's Park Mosque on a school trip.
Yeah, they're invited. You can't walk into a mosque uninvited.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So you don't know what's being said in there. And stuff like that. And, I think if you do have an Islamophobia rule where you cannot... I'm a free speech absolutist. You can call me what you like. You can offend me. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, do what you like and I'll offend you. It's not against the law. Yeah. I think if you go down this road where you can't criticise one religion, you have one religion that's protected and there's no other religions that are protected. What about all the Jews that have... Do you know what I mean? I think we're going down a very dangerous road.
I couldn't agree with you more. Absolutely, Barry. Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, we'll talk to my next guest about that and what's going on in Iran and actually, again, how it is actually all linked. That's Jake Wallace-Simons. He's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. This is Talk. 10:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk to my next guest now, Jake Wallace-Simons. He's author of Never Again: How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself, and joins us. A very good morning to you, Jake.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's talk first about what's going on in Iran, but I'd also love to hear your thoughts over this threat to free speech, very much concerning our audience today. In terms of the American president saying that basically, we've kind of almost won the war. It's going to end very soon. We've already won, but we haven't won enough. It's ahead of schedule. But also threatening to bring down death, fire and fury on Iran if oil tankers cannot pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Where do you think this is going? And can we really trust anything that Donald Trump says?
Well, I mean, that was a classic Trumpian statement. We've won, but not won enough. I mean, winning is a binary thing, isn't it? But not in Trump's world. I think what he's trying to say is that the war is going brilliantly well for America and for the Israelis, and there's no doubting that. I mean, the Ayatollah's dead. 40 of the most senior commanders in the Islamic Republic were killed within 40 seconds in the opening salvo of the war. And success has followed success in terms of depleting missile stockpiles. I mean, the drone and missile strikes are down by 75 to 90% since the beginning of the war in the last 10 days. The Iranian Navy is destroyed. The Air Force is destroyed. Air defences are destroyed pretty much. They could be holding something back, but we think that might be unlikely at this stage. But I think the fact remains that after October the 7th, Benny Gantz, the Israeli opposition leader, during the campaign in Gaza, famously said that you can't put out 80% of a fire. And the reason for that, obviously, is that the remaining 20%, if you leave the embers still glowing, they can easily burn back. Yeah. And the Iranian regime, they're not like us. They are fanatics. All they want is bloodshed. They want an apocalypse because in their theology, that will herald the coming of a figure called the Mahdi, which is like their version of the Messiah, which will lead them to global dominance and Sharia law over the whole world. That's what they want. Yeah. I mean, for them, that's the reality in which they live. They're not like us. And so they can only really be destroyed.
This is the thing, is when you have these debates going on in the West, and you get the likes of the utter beyond idiot Emily Thornberry saying, all wars end by negotiation. No, I don't think we did negotiate with Hitler, actually. I'm pretty sure we didn't. Yeah. There are some people you can't negotiate with, and there have been ongoing negotiations for many years with the Iranians. And basically, they're just taking the mick. They're just, playing for time. They're saying what they have to say. They fooled Joe Biden and his administration, no doubt at all. But the reality is, as you say, you can't negotiate with people whose entire aim in life is your destruction and death. And that's the reality that I suppose Israel has brought to the book. I was fascinated this morning. I just tune in and out of various different broadcasters during the morning, just to sort of keep an idea of what everyone's doing. And Nick Robinson on Radio 4 did not disappoint this morning, talking about, just in a casual mention, how Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, has been dreaming of war with Iran for years. Do you think, well, maybe he's just been understanding the actual reality, the existential reality of the threat that Iran actually poses to Israel and indeed the whole of the Middle East and the West?
Yeah, I mean, I think another lesson from October the 7th is that when jihadis say again and again they're going to kill you, they're going to rape and murder your wives and daughters, and they're going to get in a nuclear weapon to wipe you off the map, you have to take them seriously, because not to do so is a gamble. And it's been shown time and time again they mean what they say. I mean, to their credit, they don't try and hide what they want to do to us. They're quite open with what they want to do to us, not just the Israelis, but us here at home as well. And if you don't defend yourself, then you'll be killed. You're allowing yourself, you're opening your neck to the knife, as it were. And so the Israeli Prime Minister hasn't lusted after war with Iran out of some kind of, genocidal sort of, warmongering. He simply wants to keep his country safe. If Iran was a peaceful place that was friendly with its neighbours, friendly with Israel, friendly with the West, Israel would not want to have war with Iran. Of course, I mean, which sane country would? Nobody would.
But Israel has done peace deals with pretty much every other nation in an important nation in the Middle East. Other Middle Eastern countries very supportive of Israel over those strikes last year on Iran, cheering it on. And the fact that Iran has actually sent weaponry, sent missiles to most of the Middle Eastern countries is a bit of a giveaway of how much of a problem they are.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to begin to recognize that, yeah, not everyone's like us, and fanaticism exists in the world. It's not just a Muslim thing. We've seen Japanese fanatics during the Second World War with the kamikaze drones, German fanatics during the Nazi period, Spanish fanatics in 1936 with this sort of cult of death. It's not limited to Islam, but there's a lot of it in Islam right now, and we're facing the epicenter of it in Iran, and they want to wipe out Israel, bring apocalyptic war on the entire world. The great Satan America's next in line in their minds, and we also are menaced by Iran on our own shores with 20 or so acts of, or plots for terrorism, kidnap and assassination in Britain over the last couple of years. And so this is our fight. We all are menaced by the rise of jihadism, and I'm afraid, it's either victory or defeat.
There's been a lot of focus on the economic costs. Oil price hike went up to $120 a barrel, back down to under $90 a barrel after Donald Trump said, look, basically the war's going to be over fairly soon. We don't know whether that is. The Iranians, of course, saying, I think you'll find that we get a say in that as well. But there's no doubt at all a lot of their ability to fight has been massively depleted by those strikes, largely, by the way, from Israel, not from America. But in terms of the household energy bill costs and the like, this is going to have an impact on Donald Trump's support in America ahead of those midterms in November. It's going to have, no doubt, even more impact here on Keir Starmer. Do you think he was right to not get involved early on? We're now only hearing that a frigate, HMS Dragon, will finally, in a couple of days, set sail to Cyprus, long after the French have been there to port our military base there. And it won't arrive, basically, for another week. Who are we kidding? Meanwhile, the French are, deploying to the Straits of Hormuz to try and protect free shipping there. Do you think that Keir Starmer overall will have been proved right, or do you think actually, when push came to shove, he didn't do the right thing?
I think he quite clearly didn't do the right thing. He should obviously have allowed the Americans to use the Diego Garcia Air Base to attack Iran. That goes without saying. Hesitations about international law are ridiculous. International law in this case means getting the rubber stamp from Russia and China at the Security Council. That's not fair and equal international law. That's a corruption of it. So he didn't do the right thing there. Obviously, he and the Navy didn't do the right thing in failing to deploy our warships before hostilities started. It was obvious something was going to happen. We sent our one working submarine sailing past the Middle East on its way to Australia while American forces were building up. It then got stuck in Australia on exercises. We think it might be heading back, but it's too late now. He's been pathetic. The leadership has been awful. Our military has been depleted by 30 years, 40 years even, of cuts. And we've forgotten what it means to have to fight for what we believe in and fight for our existence. There's a great complacency. I mean, I learned the other day in a conversation on my podcast with Tom Sharp, the former Royal Navy officer, Israel's military budget is smaller than ours. And yet, look what it does with it. Yet in Britain, we waste money on ridiculous procurements, gold-plated projects. We're not practical. We're not actually thinking that we're ever going to need the military. Yeah. It's all special interests, complacency, and thinking that the world will get on and just being nice to everybody will solve everything. Well, sometimes it won't. You have an enemy, you have to name an enemy and defeat it. Otherwise, we're going to be declining to our own extinction.
Let me also ask you, and I do think these stories are very closely linked with this new definition of Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hostility, and the announcement of the first anti-Muslim hostility czar looking at this, about £4 million in terms of this sort of bringing about social cohesion. Now, I'm old enough and ugly enough to remember every single Prime Minister for the last 20 years announcing, we've got a problem with social cohesion and community tensions, and look, we've got all these people who are living completely separately in different enclaves and not actually mixing and mingling and adopting, British culture and mixing with homegrown British natives, shall we say. And nothing ever seems to change. You could argue it's actually with the mass sort of migration on steroids we've seen, particularly from the Indian subcontinent. It's gone on, it's got even worse in terms of different communities living completely isolated, parallel lives. But what do you make over the concerns about the threat to freedom of speech over this non-legal, non-crime new definition of anti-Muslim hatred?
Well, my question is this. Why is it that these new guidelines are needed only for one community? Why is it that the Muslim community in Britain needs a special treatment, needs special guidelines, non-legal guidelines, which of course will be observed by everybody anyway. Why does it need that? We have universal law in this country. We have a respect for the law without fear or favour. Everybody is protected by equality legislation, anti-hate legislation. The crimes of discrimination apply to everybody already. Why do the Muslims need this special protection? I think the answer to that, unfortunately, is that many Islamists within their community who appoint themselves as leaders have been lobbying for this as a cover for gradually imposing their version of fundamentalist Islam on the rest of us by increments, through politics, through dominating, getting into Parliament and imposing their agenda.
No, there'll be likes of sort of the liberal left who'll say that's a conspiracy theory, Jake, and basically borderline, you know, Islamophobic and bigoted. You think there's this sort of nefarious plot. So what would you say to that criticism?
Well, I would say two things. Firstly, I would say, why is it that in this, one of the drafts of the definition of Islamophobia, the very idea of talking about entryism, it has been called Islamophobia? Why would you mention that if not to disarm your enemy before you get in? And secondly, this isn't my idea. This is an idea that was presented to the government in a report in 2015 by Sir John Jenkins and Sir Charles Farr, two very distinguished security experts, into the Muslim Brotherhood. It lays out very clearly how the Muslim Brotherhood works by getting into a society incrementally over generations, pushing its agenda forward, contaminating institutions and gradually trying to take control. That's not me making it up. The government's known about it since 2015, has taken no action and failed to ban the Muslim Brotherhood.
Do you think that we are actually going to have our freedom of speech curtailed? Or do you think kind of the cat's out of the bag and people are just not prepared to have their words twisted, and shouting racist, bigot, Islamophobic people just doesn't work anymore?
But to be honest, I think freedom of speech is curtailed already. I mean, the idea of Islamophobia, OK, it hasn't been formally endorsed by the government, but everyone talks about it all the time. You're being Islamophobic. There's no room for Islamophobia here. There's Islamophobia Awareness Month, for God's sake. You know, so I think already it's having a chilling effect on what people can say. Now, just to be clear, I'm not endorsing any bigotry against Muslims.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that's OK. I'm just saying we have already the laws and regulations and conventions in place to prevent that from happening. Absolutely.
Jake Wallace-Sams, always so good to talk to you. Covered a lot of ground there. Author of Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. Just so you know, Nigel Farage has been alongside Robert Jenrick, his Shadow Home Secretary, where they Shadow Chancellor, isn't he? Sorry, well, not Shadow Treasury spokesman. Use the correct terminology. They've been at a petrol station, and they have been at the petrol station in Derbyshire, where they're talking about net zero levies. He said they're going to scrap electric vehicle grants, stop the proposed hike on fuel duty, and they say, and basically they're going to basically reform, refuel, 25p off with Farage, and also basically saying the way to do this is to be sneakily do tax in this country. That there's 6p going on a litre of petrol staged over the course of the next few months. This is just about the last time this should happen. He's also asked about the situation in Iran. The leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage, has said, let's not get ourselves involved in another foreign war. We don't have a navy. We can't even defend our own military base in Cyprus. 10:50 is the time. We're going to be talking more about those energy bills and inflation with the Institute of Economic Affairs, Andy Mayer. This is Talk.
UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:53 is the time. Let's turn our attention to, well, the cost of running your car, your household bills, putting the heating on, the lecky on, everything you're going to buy in the next few months, depending on how long this war in Iran lasts. Let's talk to Andy Mayer. He's an energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs, the free market think tank. Hello, Andy.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, we had the Chancellor Rachel Reeves making a statement. That's never something we think's a good thing. Only a week after a rather pointless spring statement, which basically barely included any analysis of where we could be after the war in Iran had already started. But she's basically talking about how we probably expect inflation to go up. We probably expect interest rates to stop coming down and may go up. Of course, cost of borrowing and the like. Basically, this means everything's going to get more expensive and we're probably going to have to pay more taxes as well. Is that right?
The last part, maybe not. So what's going to happen is the cost of living is going to rise if the war persists and if prices remain high. And what that means is that everything essential, when the price of energy rises, becomes more expensive. So food, basic industrial goods like steel and glass and ceramics, and then everything that you actually need to get on with your day. So we will feel less money in our pockets. Yeah. We will feel poorer because we are.
And is that because basically oil, gas, every bit of transportation involves oil, but also food, fertilizer is made with fossil fuels, isn't it? I mean, it comes back to everything.
Yeah, it's all of those things, and it's usually a lagged effect. So we see the impact between 3 to 12 months later. So people can be taken by surprise. I mean, for example, if you'll pardon this illustration, the wind industry is a lot more expensive today because of the 2022 crisis. Yeah. And that's because they have fossil fuels in their supply chain.
Of course they do. Of course they do. Has anyone told Ed Miliband about that? So how bad can it be? We've already got inflation at 3%. Of course, the Labour keeps saying, oh, it's so much lower than it was under the Tories at 11.1%. Because it hit over 11% because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the impact that had on, on world supplies. Of fuel and fertiliser and food and goodness knows what. And they were blaming the Tories for that, when, of course, a lot of that was really out of their control, other than, of course, mad net zero policies. But Labour are likely to be hit if this carries on just as much, aren't they?
Yeah, we need to be a little bit careful about terms like inflation, because what's really going on is things that we don't need, like luxury goods, holidays, flights, that kind of stuff.
Wait a minute. What do you mean we don't need holidays? That's well, an essential in my life.
If things came to the crunch, you'd probably choose heating over taking a holiday.
True.
And what's happening there is those prices are going down because people can't spend money on them.
Yeah.
The only way that inflation goes up is if the government prints more money or uses quantitative easing, which is a fancy way of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And that can be a result of policies like trying to cover the cost of energy by using subsidy schemes. And there the government could do an enormous amount of damage and permanently make us all poorer by bringing inflation into the system.
But again, we end up paying for that anyway, don't we?
Well, yes and no. I mean, what the 2022 government got wrong was trying to suppress the price signal. So when you've got a crisis moment like this, you want people to know energy is more expensive. Yeah. And then you want people who can cut back to cut back while not exposing the vulnerable. So you don't want people to be choosing between heating and eating. And the best way of stopping that happening is by using targeted welfare. So one of the things the government said last time was that they couldn't do that quickly. And there's been 4 years since then in order to prepare. So presumably this government have got a ready-to-go plan in order to stop making the same mistakes that was made last.
Good luck with that. Now, I mean, in terms of how bad it can get, everything's going to depend on whether or not this war is over very quickly in a matter of a few weeks, whether or not they can protect oil tankers coming in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, and indeed there's talk with this phone call yesterday that Donald Trump had for an hour with Vladimir Putin. By the way, 3 times as long as he spoke with our Prime Minister earlier this week, and talking about basically ending the sanctions on Russian oil sales to certain countries. Now that that could make things a bit better, couldn't it? But of course that would also impact the Ukraine war.
Yeah, I mean, there are no good choices, and the Americans have already signalled to India that they're going to allow them to use Russian oil and gas. So Where the markets are on this at the moment is they don't think that these prices are going to stay too high for too long.
Yeah.
So the futures markets are a lot lower than the current prices. And you saw today that things have fallen rapidly from their spikes yesterday. So nobody really knows. But the balance of opinion at the moment, the wisdom of crowds, is that we should be in for a short, not long war.
Okay.
Are the Americans really going to allow the Iranian regime to stay in place, particularly with the son of the person that Trump's missiles killed? I mean, that seems to me unlikely. Equally unlikely the Israelis would accept that position, so there could be wider conflagration. So everything is uncertain.
Absolutely. Well, on that happy note, Andy Mayer, energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs, thank you very much indeed. Henry Hill still with me, political commentator. This is it. A lot of this is, who knows? And the government, same as we, when we go to the forecourt or when we go to the supermarket in the coming months, we're just victims of these international events, aren't we?
Exactly. And I think the mention of Ukraine was really important because, again, that's another thing that British politicians of all parties have touted as one of the things they're most proud of in their foreign policy.
Yeah.
But actually, what props up Putin's war machine? Russian oil exports.
Yeah. Yeah, which Europe is still allowing. It is still quite extraordinary there. I'm always amazed every time they say we're going to have more sanctions on Russia. I'm always like, sorry, why after 4 years are there any more sanctions you can put on? They should all have been put on in the first few weeks. But I'm old-fashioned like that. But there we are. That's why we're in the mess we are in. So much more to talk about. We're going to talk more about what Nigel Farage has had to announce about reinstating the 5p fuel duty cut in his first budget if he gets in. And Robert Jenrick, his would-be Chancellor, claiming £13 billion of net zero savings. I think there's a heck of a lot more than that, to be fair. We'll talk about that and also, of course, more on the Islamophobia definition, that impact on free speech and what the hell is going on with Iran. Oh, yes, and that Iranian football team as well. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is talk.
A very, very good morning. I'm indeed Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense, just approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Plenty going on. I'm with you live until 1 o'clock. If you miss anything from the show, or missed anything from yesterday's show, you can go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. We're going to be discussing more about what's going on in Iran, that new Islamophobia, anti-Muslim hostility definition, which is sparking fears about freedom of speech in Britain, as if we haven't got those already. David Lammy, the Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, warning that criminals will walk free if his plans to axe jury trials are blocked, but there's simply no evidence for that. And also why 1 in 4 migrants from outside the EU who've got settled status here in the UK, so they're not citizens but they'd stay forever, are claiming benefits. That's weird, because I thought we were told those people were a great benefit to us, but apparently not. I want to hear your thoughts on the 2 biggest stories we're talking about today, but as you know, you can always get in touch on anything and everything you want to talk about. You are in charge. But in particular, I want to hear your thoughts both on what Donald Trump has said about the Iran war will end very soon, but also the UK government promising, basically, if it doesn't help with our household bills as they're threatening to rise. What's your reaction to that? Also, crucially, will Labour's new anti-Muslim czar and the anti-Muslim hostility definition threaten our freedom of speech? Tell us why you think it will. Tell us why you think it won't. Either way, get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. And I shall be sneezing really helpfully during the middle of reading. I do apologise. Sorry. Oh, there's another one coming. Oh, no. Of course, apologies, everyone. There's nothing I can do. I mean, you've got to sneeze, you've got to sneeze. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1 standard network rate message. I'm delighted to say that joining me, not sneezing, is Henry Hill, journalist and political commentator for the whole show. Morning once again to you.
Hello.
Right, just trying not to do the next one. I think I've had a permanent cold my entire 50s. Is that just a thing now? COVID. Is it COVID? Come on. Is it COVID jabs? Go on, get in touch.
Why are you opening up that box?
Because they'll be on Twitter telling me that anyway. Henry, let's start with the Islamophobia definition this hour, because we talked a lot about Iran and the war. Small battle, a big war going on. Oh, right, now he's coughing.
Just once.
What we like? What would you do? Let's talk about that, because we talked to Jake Wallace-Simons, you and I have discussed it already. There are a lot of fears over this new definition of Islamophobia. They're calling it anti-Muslim hatred. The people who've been involved in this, again, this is a big Labour project. Same as far as I can tell, every other government has done. David Cameron was like, oh, we need to tackle community cohesion. They basically, we all talk about how there are parallel societies, there are groups of people in this country, not just people who are Muslim who've come from abroad, but people from many other communities. But I think it's been particularly exacerbated by a large number of people coming from, particularly from Pakistan, but people coming to this country and making their lives here, who are not integrating, not assimilating, living what to all intents and purposes are parallel lives in this country, and expecting to basically carry on living as if they were back in their home country. That's the bit I don't understand. Why have you come to Britain from somewhere like Pakistan or Bangladesh and then want to carry on your life as if you were there? A, stay there, or B, why do you want to take advantage of what all that Britain can offer you in that sense? But we've also seen, hostility between, that's an awful phrase, communities, when we have seen, let's be honest, different kinds of policing, two-tier policing of different groups of people because of their religion or their ethnicity or their skin colour. And we've seen, yes, a rise in Islamophobic attacks, as in people attacking, threatening, abusing people because they are Muslim. Minding their own business, walking down the street. Not acceptable, full stop, in our society. We've also seen a much bigger rise, by the way, per person who's actually of the particular faith, of anti-Semitism as well. And by the way, that is largely perpetrated by people who are Muslim. That is the reality in terms of those stats. Now then, the government reckons that they want to tackle cohesion. They're going to put 4 million quid into tackling this. They think that an anti-Muslim hostility czar will help this, someone who can direct this. They've brought all these so-called community leaders, self-appointed, as they always are, nearly all men, to help come up with this definition of anti-Muslim hostility. They're defining it as crimes such as violence or harassment directed at people who are either Muslim or perceived to be, as well as prejudicial stereotyping to encourage hatred against them and unlawful discrimination. A, do we need this? And B, will this threaten our freedom of speech?
I mean, it almost definitionally threatens freedom of speech because, as we discussed before, they're not amending the criminal law with this. So the only thing it can really do is affect speech, right? Because, of course, attacking people is already illegal. And so what this will do, and so realistically, all that the Islamophobia czar can do in that case is be like, and that was especially bad, but the police will already be dealing with an attack. So what they will do is focus on where they can add value, which is in police.
If you're listening rather than watching, you're missing the speech marks there.
The scare quotes there, which is speech policing, right? They will be going around, they will be finding microaggressions, right? They will be finding all kinds of other things. They will produce endless reports pointing out how much of this there is, demanding more action, because that's what these things always do. Yeah. Right? Whenever
mission creep.
Exactly. I think this is a mistake the Tories kept making when, obviously this is a Labour project, but they keep giving in to progressives who demanded something like this. And they'd be like, well, we've done it now. You know, we gave it a £4 million budget and whatever else, and now we've done it. It's like, no, you've now created a little bureaucracy who will endlessly produce justifications for their existence.
They're not going to say problem solved, are they?
No bureaucracy has ever done this. And so, of course, it is going to erode freedom of speech. I think that one of the actually challenging things about this for the Conservatives, of course, is that the Conservatives tend to be very strongly in favour of having a specific regime for dealing with anti-Semitism, right? And if you're making a very strongly principled case for equal treatment under the law, that isn't obviously more defensible, which is something that I've asked Tories about before. But the ultimate problem is if we're talking about cohesion. In this country today, for various reasons, some of which is technological, the assimilation pressure is much less than it used to be, right? There used to be 5 television channels. You had to watch them if you wanted to consume media. It is now incredibly easy for somebody who comes here to keep consuming media from their own country. There are parts of the country now where there is a critical mass of speakers of Urdu or whatever language, which means that the pressure to learn English is gone, right?
Well, we know that the 2021 census show there are 1 million people in this country who can't speak any or very good English.
Exactly.
I would be surprised if that figure is not at least double that, personally, because lots of people simply don't fill out the census.
And only a tiny share of them will be Welsh. And so in that case, if you really want to promote cohesion, you actually have a much stronger obligation to have equality under the law, right? Because the moment that you start creating or appearing to create law that treats different communities differently, that has different standards, where you think that actually my religion or the colour of my skin will affect how the state treats my behaviour, that is utterly, utterly poisonous.
And we already have that. We've got two-tier police. There's no doubt at all. And again, this idea, and I would say also basically the racism and the anti-Muslim, frankly, not hatred, but sort of dismissive of this idea that, oh well, you know, you'd have to ban, for instance, you know, Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, Jewish Israelis from turning up to Birmingham and play a match, you know, and to watch a match against Aston Villa, because the Muslim community, again their word, community, is opposed to these people turning up, and they will get violent. The idea that we can't expect them to obey the law. I mean, and again, this poverty of low expectations, and this idea again that the left has decided that there is a hierarchy of grievance and victimhood, and it used to be, Jews were definitely at the bottom. Now Jews apparently are at the top. They're like they're not victims at all. They're above whites. They're controlling everything. Again, blatant anti-Semitism. Whites, definitely bad. Boys, oh, you're very bad people. Heterosexuals, oh, good God. Women, I get a pass for a bit for being a woman. I'm obviously a victim of some sort, apparently. And then you've got the skin colour. And then you've got Muslims. And at the very, very, very bottom, you've got Muslims. They are the ultimate victims in the progressive sort of hierarchy of victimhood. And this is the thing. And this is what's so ridiculous, when the rest of us are looking on and seeing, I mean, again, I don't want anyone ever to be attacked or shouted at or treated badly or given a dirty look because they appear to be Muslim. That's unacceptable and unwarranted. But when we can't have proper conversations about lack of cohesion, lack of respect for the values of this country, the culture of this country, people not learning the language. I don't think you should live here if you're not learning the language. And yes, I think the same about British people living on the Costa del Sol. Learn the language, show a modicum of respect, for goodness sake. Some of my family members live in France for at least half the year. They speak French. They don't walk into shops and speak English because they live there. They speak fluent French. That's how you do it. That's basic manners, I would say. Certainly, I don't think we should pay a single penny for a court translator, for a doctor's, NHS translator, schools. I mean, I think your kids should speak English when they turn up at school.
I don't think Spain... I think actually that's one of the things that Spain does when we talk about the Costa del Sol. I don't think you can get Spanish government services in English and they don't pay for translators.
Well, why should they?
Well,
Exactly.
I agree.
We need to be much stricter about this stuff. But one of the things that really bothered me about this document in the original leaks was saying that basically, it's a two-way street. And that basically, this is about, respect for other cultures. And again, as I said on yesterday's show, there are aspects of every culture I respect, but not every aspect. I mean, there are plenty of aspects of Islam, of Muslim culture. No, I simply do not respect women covering their heads, certainly not covering their faces, which is not required in Islam at all, by the way. Women cover their heads in Islam. I've researched this at great length when my daughter had to go on a school visit to a mosque. And women cover their heads for two reasons: to show humility to God. Well, I don't believe in God, so and to show humility to men. I really object to that. I'm sorry, I don't like it. But you're free to do it in this country. Now, I would personally bring in a ban day one if I was in charge of face coverings of all kinds, but particularly your burqas and the like, and your niqabs. But I don't have respect, halal killing of animals, cruelty to animals. Don't have to respect that. I don't have to respect anything. Why is there a requirement now under this new law, rule, guidance? Am I allowed to say no? I don't want to eat halal meat that has been cruelly killed. I don't eat, I don't eat, foie gras because it's cruel. I mean, am I allowed to have those views, or is that going to be considered Islamophobic?
And the thing is, and this is one of the many problems with doing things this way, we don't know, right? Because actually what this definition means will be decided... Yeah, it will be decided, one, in the first instance by the Tsar, the latest of the millions of Tsars, and then it will be decided in the courts, potentially, if it becomes an aggregating factor.
But this, again, it's an aggregating factor, but it's not the law. But then neither were non-crime hate incidents, and there are 60 arrests a day. 60 arrests a day for non-crime hate incidents.
Exactly. We don't know how the police will handle this. We don't know how HR departments will handle this, right? Because it will end up in, even if it's not the law, if it's used to dismiss somebody and they take it to an employment tribunal, we're still going to get court judgments about this, right? But I think the other thing, and we've discussed this before, the other thing about things like this, and you see this so often, and I think with campaigning groups on the left, is that by trying to create this block, this group definition, which you can't criticise, they take a group which is overwhelmingly comprised of people who are perfectly lovely.
And living their normal lives just like everybody else.
And they make their public face the worst elements of it, right? Because it's like, actually, if you speak out against Islamism, or if you speak out against particularly hardline brands of Islam, then you're Islamophobic, and you're telling people that they're actually criticising the great mass of British Muslims.
When you're not.
And it's not the case, because the great mass of British Muslims are not supporting those positions or causing any trouble to anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Again, I do think there is an issue, though. And again, not that I would think, say, as someone of half Irish stock, that when the IRA were bombing people, that I, as someone of half Irish stock, would be required to speak out and say, I condemn this. I do not hold people responsible for the actions of others. My community leaders, apparently. But I do think, I really think if I were Muslim, and this I was a completely moderate. I wanted to live, born here, or if my family had come here, and I wanted to make my life here, living in Britain, not in, some godforsaken hellhole. I'm sorry, Pakistan, Bangladesh, countries where you just do not have proper liberties, and where religion is sort of, is ruling everything. I would want to start having, if we're going to have community leaders who represented more moderate views and did speak out against this stuff. And there is definitely an issue within, again, again, we talk about communities. I don't think people even get to choose. And again, it's male appointees, these mosques, these imams. We are seeing a massive impact and influence of extremist imams and hate preachers within mosques. That's where a lot of this is happening. It's not just online, and the government does nothing about it because, I don't want anyone to think I'm anti-Muslim. If you're being pro-Muslim, not that we should be pro or anti anybody of a religion, would actually involve making sure that people were not being radicalised by organisations like the Muslim Brotherhood and others, who, by the way, are banned in most Middle Eastern Muslim countries because of the threat that they pose. And that's what brings us on to, obviously, our other slightly big topic this week, and this is the Iran war. Because when people talk about it's a war over there, it's not. It's being fought out here. The battle of Islamist threat in this country, 20 foiled terror attacks, the security services say to us, funded by Iran. All that's been going on in Israel dealing with October the 7th, the Hezbollah attacks, the attacks by the Houthi rebels on shipping. What is going on in our price? This is all because of Islamist extremism. Their community leaders, the Ayatollahs, are a bit of a problem. Are we allowed to speak out about that?
I mean, again, it is absolutely you're entirely correct. It is a fact that the Islamic regime in Iran has been an open exporter of hostility in a way that very few governments, with the possible exception of Vladimir Putin's Russia, actually have. They have backed armed anti-Semitic murderous militias in pretty much every country in the Middle East. They backed the Assad regime when it was massacring its own people in Syria. They were in Lebanon, they were in Gaza, they now have the Houthis that you mentioned in Yemen. And their objective is perfectly clear when we talk about Israel. It is exterminate the Jews.
Yes.
Right? I think the Houthis have...
They're quite open about
it. The Houthis, I think, have the most charmingly clear one, which is they're basically just death to the Jews, is their slogan. Which makes the efforts makes the efforts of Western people to pretend that there's some kind of freedom fighting force challenging to do. And there is a direct connection, and sometimes people are, can we sit this out, right? Can we just, what have we backed off? What have, Britain didn't get involved in Vietnam, we didn't get involved in the 1970s, and we were able to be, but this is not like that, right? Because those were wars with really distinct, discrete theatres of war run by coherent governments that were ultimately nationalistic. Right? What they wanted was to get out of Vietnam, or in the Arab case, they were specifically fixated on Israel, but when he sat out. This is already a government which has exported terror around the world and will continue to do so.
But again, America is the great Satan. Israel and Britain are both little Satans.
Because of our historic role in Iran.
Exactly. In terms of the impact people are getting, with the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, she made a statement yesterday in the Commons, only a week after her spring statement, which was already out of date as she said it. Because it was unravelled before then, because all the numbers from the Office for Budget Responsibility were basically outdated because of the impact of this attacks on Iran. But she's talking about there'll be some help for people. We've interestingly had I think it was a plan before that statement we knew about, and Nigel Farage and his would-be Chancellor Robert Jenrick, they've been at a petrol station forecourt in Buxton in Derbyshire, where they talked about basically making some £13.5 billion in savings on net zero spending. I think there's plenty more to be saved there personally, but also talking about scrapping electric vehicle grants and crucially stopping the fuel duty hikes, which again trying to force the Chancellor into U-turn. I mean, those fuel duty hikes, this has just been an ongoing battle that's just been going on for a very, very, very long time. But this is about cost of living, and this is where Nigel Farage has learned a lot from the Trump playbook in terms of at the end of the day, elections are resolved and decided by cost of living, and nothing that's happening in this country right now, even before the Iran war, but certainly since this attack, looks like it's going in the right direction for this government.
No. No government. I think the basic golden rule is that no government is re-elected if people feel poorer at the end of its term in office than the beginning, right? And as all of the costs are going in the wrong direction, and energy, an oil price spike doesn't just hit energy bills, right? It feeds through into everything else. It's transport, and that means everything that gets transported, which means food. It filters through the entire economy. But I think the interesting question here, when we're talking about the government, is at what point is the government going to take this seriously enough that it is prepared to let go of some of its other commitments, right? Because actually the reason that energy costs in this country are so high is not international gas prices. That is
such a load of nonsense.
Because other countries are also paying international gas prices, shockingly, unless they're France and they've got lots of domestic nuclear. It's the fact that we've heaped so many taxes and baked so many costs into the pipeline, which we could cut. Right? But time and again, Western governments have just proven completely unwilling to do this, even when, earlier on, you know, Western governments were supposed to be driving up oil production. Do you know why they all agreed to drive up oil production? Because oil is propping up Vladimir Putin's war economy,
so
and we all back Ukraine.
You bump up supply, and that means the price goes down.
If the price falls below, I think, is it $80 a barrel or $100 a barrel, Putin literally can't afford to keep fighting, right? Did we actually drive up production? Did Canada drive up production? No. And it will be interesting to see whether this domestic issue, which will destroy this government, is enough to give the Prime Minister the spine to stand up to Ed Miliband, because nothing else has.
It is interesting that actually it was Ed Miliband apparently leading that cabinet revolt last week on whether or not they should take part in these, and allow Diego Garcia base and to be used by the US. Look, HMS Dragon, the frigate, is finally going to set sail for Cyprus in the next couple of days. I mean, it's been a national humiliation. We've got the French. They've said a fleet to protect oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. They've got 8 frigates out there. That's more than our entire fleet of frigates, for God's sake. I mean, and an aircraft carrier being sent as well. It's going to be a few days before this HMS Dragon heads out to Cyprus, and it's going to take a week to arrive. This has massively, massively exposed the fact that we just simply do not have a defence capability anymore that is worthy of its name.
You know, the fascinating thing is when you talk to Sweeney, the cope that comes out of places like the Foreign Office is that actually Britain can get by on soft power. And do you know the most damaging thing for British soft power in the last decade has been this week?
Yeah.
Because soft power is an extension of hard power, right? The soft power comes from, look, we've got Cyprus, we've got a base in Bahrain, we've got all of these forward bases. Actually, that gives us quite a lot of leverage. If there's no ships in the sea, in the naval base, if there's not enough planes in Cyprus to defend the Cypriot bases, those things are not just useless, they're a vector for embarrassment.
Yeah.
France spends less on defence than we do.
It has more.
And it has more. It has a deployable carrier group, right? It has a functional land forces. And it has a functional air force. We contrive to spend more money. We don't spend nearly enough, more money.
Let's get the French procurement guy to do our procurement from now on. It's just madness, isn't it? It really is. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this, whether it's Islamophobia definition, threat to freedom of speech, talking about the Iran war, household bills, our involvement, and just, I would say it's the national humiliation we're facing. I also want to get to the Iranian women's soccer team. They've been granted asylum, or 5 members in Australia. I have to say, worry about their families back in Iran. Very much worry about the other members of the football team who are going to be flying home and chosen not to take asylum, about their safety as well, given that they've been branded traitors for refusing to sing the Iranian national anthem on the first night, and clearly not looking very happy when they sang it at the next match. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Love to hear your thoughts. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 11:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Grace is on the line in London and wants to talk about the Islamophobia definition, anti-Muslim hatred. Grace, thanks for joining us. What do you want to say?
Hi. Yeah, I think that, and I think first it's hostility rather than hatred. I heard
hostility, right? Yeah.
Saying yesterday, which makes it even more vague.
Yeah,
but
nebulous, isn't it? Yeah.
It reinforces the idea that you can kind of group together Muslim people and that they are distinct from other people, whereas in reality, we're all individual human beings with our own ideas, and Muslims are very different from each other. And you mentioned the New Testament, and I would want to say briefly, I think that the Old Testament should necessarily, I don't think this is what you were saying, but I don't think the Old Testament should necessarily be likened to what Muhammad was doing. But there's a whole complication.
It was a bit more eye for an eye and, raining down brimstone, wasn't it? Rather than the New Testament teachings of Christ, which, a bit more, loving everybody.
It's complicated because there are various teachings in the Old Testament about caring for the stranger and justice and things like that. But the New Testament is fundamental, and Jesus tells us that we need to love our neighbours, including those who we disagree with, and he tells us not just to have an eye for an eye, but to love those who are supposedly your enemies. And it's partly because his teachings have shaped our culture that we have this impetus to avoid hatred in the way that we do. We know that it's wrong to hate people because of how Jesus' teachings have shaped our culture. We should be able to discuss ideas and decide for ourselves what ideas and beliefs are, and not have people who are born into into Islam presumed to be different from the rest of us, and not assume that they'll think for themselves about what they believe.
Absolutely. Again, we don't lump all Christians into one group. I mean, and I say, as an atheist, I think it's one of those things that a lot of people, we just lost a lot of the teaching over the years. And I wasn't aware of this until I was well into adulthood, of how much our culture, how much our history, how much even things like the Industrial Revolution has come about because of Christian, Judeo-Christian culture and the ideas that those values, have given, and that individual relationship with God and individual responsibility and things like that. And these are very different from other religions. And that is something that we need to recognise and should celebrate.
Yeah, and ultimately, Jesus is saying, on the one hand, that God loves us even when he disagrees with us. That's why Jesus died for us. So similarly, we should be able to have respect for people whilst disagreeing with them at the same time. Yeah. And also, he's telling each person to decide. Each person decides whether or not they're going to follow him. And that's really in contrast to Muhammad's idea of kind of seizing power. But again, that's not to say that most Muslims would want to...
No, but nevertheless, the teachings in the Quran are very, very clear about that. If you leave the religion, or if you don't succumb to the religion, you must die. I mean, that is the teaching. And again, vast majority of Muslims in this world do not go around thinking that or doing that. However, we've got an awful lot of so-called self-appointed community leaders and imams in this country who actually, who have worryingly extremist views.
Yeah, I think it would be much better to treat each person as an individual and hear their own views. And when there is hatred aimed at people and when people are mistreated, that needs to be against the law, whether it's about Islam or not.
Well, exactly. Except I think people do have a right to hate. I think you're absolutely entitled. You can hate an individual. I think people have... A man is totally entitled to hate a woman, a black person, or a white person, or someone of the other colour. People are entitled. Hate is a normal human emotion, and I don't think that we should have thought crimes. It's what you do with that. If you harass somebody, you abuse someone, you physically attack someone, that is the crime, not the hating. I don't really approve of hate crimes as such. I think it's irrelevant whether someone... I think people have a right to have their own thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Within Christianity, we believe that it is wrong to be hateful, but that is kind of between you and God, not you and the law. The law shouldn't be stopping you hating. You should be aiming not to hate if that's what you have decided to do as a follower of Jesus, who tells us not to hate. If you are not a Christian and you're going to hate someone, that shouldn't be something that the law dictates.
Yeah, very good point.
It's a personal matter, not a legal matter.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I feel like we could do a bit of BBC religious programming, me Irene Grace, couldn't we? Thank you very much indeed for that. George is on the line. He's in London. George, you want to talk about where we are in terms of the war in Iran?
Yeah, so I've just got back from Beirut. You and I have spoken before. My husband and I, he's Lebanese, and so we just escaped on Sunday. Actually, he's gone to Athens.
Oh, you were actually out there when? Right. Gosh, I'm glad you're back safely.
Yeah, all of last week when it all started to kick off. But what I wanted to say was, obviously over there we're all talking about the Islamic regime in Iran and what Hezbollah has done to Lebanon, which was a beautiful, peaceful Christian country, which has been utterly destroyed when Islam took over.
Yep.
And, you know, I was having a lovely dinner party last week in Beirut, and one thing my friend said was, they are so shocked that the UK is pandering to the Muslim vote. They haven't banned the IRGC, sorry, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard.
Yep.
They allow Qatar, which is friendly to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood, to buy up property here and have political influence here.
We allowed the Ayatollah's son to buy 6 properties in one street, for God's sake.
I know. And, you know, bar none, all of my Christian friends in Lebanon share the same view, which is that, and it's not something we're allowed to say here, but it really is not just Islamism. If it is the book itself and Sharia law when it's applied, which is the problem. Now, there is not, let me tell you, I'm gay. I'm married in this country, had a great wedding. My family love my husband. His parents don't even know that we're married. I'm his mate. There is not one Muslim country on planet Earth where being gay is illegal, except Turkey, weirdly, but they...
Where it's legal, yeah.
They have the separation of church and state, although it's kind of changing at the minute with Erdogan. But more importantly, and this is my main point, I suppose, is the shift in attitudes amongst our supposedly liberal Muslim friends here in the UK and in the Middle East. Obviously, I've got a lot of friends there. And since Gaza, and now even more so with Iran, they have all, without exception, shown their true colours. My husband was talking to one of them, supposedly a liberal gay guy called Khalil, who I adored. He was saying that my husband has become an extremist far-right anti-Islam person. And he said that because my husband had the gall to say that the Muslim Brotherhood and Hezbollah are destroying countries. And the response was, why have you got a problem with the Muslim Brotherhood? Why have you got a problem with Islam? And this is my husband, who's an Arab who's seen his country torn to pieces by Hezbollah, which is a proxy, of course, of Iran. And I just think this goes to the heart of the matter, is they've curated this culture of victimhood, and it shields them from any criticism or analysis, you know, and from Charlie Hebdo to Ariana Grande, Lee Rigby, London Bridge, the Bataclan, you name it, you know. This is a strategy that's being enacted, and it's in the Quran, not all of it. Some of the Quran's beautiful, and they recognize Mary and Jesus, you know, but the Hadiths particularly full of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing again, and this culture of victimhood, where we have, you know, within 20 minutes of a terror attack carried out by an Islamist terrorist, you know, shouting Allahu Akbar in the name of Allah, you know, God is great, and then within 10 minutes we've got the British politicians and media going, oh, I hope this doesn't increase Islamophobia and anti-Muslim hatred. Like, hey, we're still wiping the blood off the pavement. Could you give us a minute? Was I think what the rest of us are saying. But anyway, a really, really interesting call, George. Thank you so much. I'm glad you and your husband are back safe. So 11:36 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking more about not just this free speech issue, but also the issue of, well, if you did go to court, would you be allowed to have a jury trial? Because David Lammy, in all his infinite wisdom, if you ever watched Mastermind, you'll know how infinite it is, thinks that you shouldn't unless you're facing more than 3 years behind bars. We're going to be talking to a criminal barrister, Matthew Scott Casey, about that. Up next, this is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. 11:38 is the time. This is Talk. Let's go straight to my next guest. Matthew Scott is a criminal barrister at Pump Court Chambers and a legal blogger, and plenty on the legal issues to talk about today. Matthew, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We've been talking an awful lot about this freedom of speech and it's posed by this Islamophobia issue. We'll come back to that in just a couple of moments. But first, I do want to talk to you about removing jury trials. We've got a big vote in the House of Commons today. It's the second reading by MPs in the Commons about the proposals for various different criminal justice reforms proposed by the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary David Lammy. But among them, there's some very sensible ideas there about, improving, getting things through courts quicker. But among them is this idea that we should scrap jury trials for all of cases that don't face a more than 3-year jail sentence. We've seen a letter from a huge number of former judges, retired judges and current lawyers basically saying, warning that this is a terrible idea. 3,200 lawyers and 22 retired judges saying that this is a very, very, very dangerous move and that it shouldn't go ahead. David Lammy says that, look, we've got massive delays in the court system. He says that criminals are walking free because of these delays. So who's right?
The 3,000 lawyers and judges are right. And it may be one of those issues where one would expect perhaps lawyers to want more powers to be given to lawyers, because that's the effect of the reforms, is to hand powers away from ordinary people to judges and lawyers. Well, we don't, because we mostly recognise that for most cases, certainly most serious cases, and any case where you're going to get 2 or 3 years in prison is certainly a serious case, juries produce a much fairer result than judges alone. And that's why we're opposed in the main to these proposals.
Why did you say that? Why do juries? Again, Magna Carta onwards, you should not have your liberty taken away unless you're judged by your own peers. But why does a jury produce a more fair result?
Well, first of all, it's recognised by the population as a whole. Juries are one of the few popular parts of the criminal justice system. Everybody's criticising judges all the time. Generally speaking, people don't criticise juries. They perhaps criticise individual decisions, and certainly juries can get it very badly wrong. But generally speaking, it's one part of the system which actually has the confidence of the public in the way that perhaps others do rather less. Secondly, anybody who has seen trials conducted by single judges will know that whilst there are plenty of very good judges, we see trials of that sort in the magistrates' court when district judges can do trials and can decide guilt or innocence. Equally, there are some very bad judges, and to trust your liberty to a single individual is, in the view of most people in this country, certainly in the view of most lawyers in this country, is extremely dangerous.
It's the wisdom of crowds. And I've said before, I did jury duty a couple of years ago, and I found it incredibly, I thought, life-affirming, I would say, in terms of how seriously everyone took it and the decision that we took and how we were treated by the court. I was really, really impressed. And this thing is, we've had this argument from David Lammy that it's juries that are somehow holding up the process. Now, I imagine when you're not having to explain to the jury and swear them in and everything, there's a little bit less time being taken on that. But at the end of the day, a court case is still going to have to take place. You're still going to have the prosecution case and the defence case. You're still going to, finish at 4 o'clock because people have got other work to get to and people have to get home, and often they're travelling a long distance to court. That's not going to change. So I still can't work out why he, despite all the evidence which suggests that this would make, 2 or 3% max difference to the backlog of 80,000 cases, why he's still claiming that this is somehow the solution to cutting the court backlog. And in his argument, and the argument we see from a lot of Labour women MPs arguing that this in particular is allowing rapists to walk free because cases are taking 2, 3, 4, 5 years to come to court, and that means that it's impossible for a jury to convict, etc. Why are they still holding on to that argument when there's simply no evidence for it?
Well, I think that's the point. There is no evidence, and even Sir Brian Levison, in his reports, who recommended something not the same actually as what Lammy is proposing. He was proposing trials with judge sitting with magistrates, but even Levison accepted that there wasn't really much evidence. He said it was his opinion that this would speed things up, but he accepted that there was very little evidence that it would do so. And the problem is that there are other delays that are built into this proposal. For example, judges will now have to give reasoned judgments, and it can take a long time for a judge to write a reasoned judgment. Yeah. Yes, they have to sum up at the moment, and people might say, well, summing up a case is a bit like giving a reasoned judgment. Well, it's not, because they don't have to make any decisions when they're summing up. Yeah. A lot of a summing up is almost giving boilerplate directions, which are given in every case, and then a swift summary of the evidence. That's very different from writing a judgment explaining why somebody is guilty. Yeah,
whereas a jury, you have your vote and you agree, you disagree, and then you come out and say guilty or innocent. We don't have to. We don't have to
absolutely.
Give yeah.
And so we simply don't know how long it's going to take to adding to the delays while we wait for verdicts. Or are we going to speed things up and say, get on with it, judges? Don't take your time over this. Just come up with a speedy judgment without really thinking about it. That's not justice either.
But one of the things I find extraordinary was the tiny number of cases that do actually go to Crown Court and do go to juries, because the vast majority of cases are dealt with in Magistrates Court. Huge number of cases that do go to Crown Court, the option. Miraculously, on the day of it, actually, before a jury is actually going to be, assembled, people suddenly, as the clerk in my court when I was on jury duty said, they suddenly miraculously remember that they are indeed guilty. They plead guilty, and then they don't actually have to have that court day, just a sentencing day. But what would actually...
It happens the other way around, Julia, as well. It happens the other way around, when the prosecution miraculously realise that actually their case they've decided to look at properly because of
Someone's
the imminent
finally paid attention. Yeah.
Exactly. They might realise that the other way around, that their case isn't quite as strong as it looks. And in fact, no case ever looks weaker than just before you go into court on either side. People suddenly spot weaknesses in their case, which before they hadn't really thought about.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But I mean, what would actually speed things up and lead to better decisions?
I'm afraid it does come down to money. And I'm certainly not blaming this government alone, because it's been the case for years and years that the Ministry of Justice has been underfunded. It's been a source of cuts, more so than almost any other department. Yeah. And the chickens have come home to roost, I'm afraid. It's a big problem. But money, I'm afraid, is at the root of the problem.
And that is money as in to pay for the lawyers, to pay the judges, to hire more people, hire more court clerks, open more courts. And we know that a huge number of courtrooms in courthouses every day, simply there's no one sitting there. So of course there's a delay, because you're not using all the courts.
Absolutely, and there's been a bit more money for that. But there are also now shortages of lawyers to prosecute cases. I mean, 10 years ago, it was pretty much unheard of for a case to go ahead, not to go ahead because a lawyer couldn't be found, a barrister or a solicitor advocate couldn't be found. That, I'm afraid, happens quite often now. If for example, a case overruns or a lawyer is ill on a particular case,
there's no one else.
Then the clerks are in my chambers or somebody else's chambers ringing around almost all around the country to find an alternative. Very often, nobody can be found. And if that it can't be found, well, the case doesn't go ahead. Yeah. But again, that ultimately comes down to money, because young lawyers don't see the criminal law as a particularly attractive
Well, certainly with the travel and the hours and the low pay. I mean, again, people forget these people are often on pittance when they're doing legal aid. Barely even covers their travel costs. You can understand why. Matthew Scott, we'll see how that vote goes. Criminal barrister at Pump Court Chambers, a legal blogger. Thank you very much. Henry, it's very interesting that we're talking to you. There's something like 80 MPs being led by backbencher Carl Turner on the Labour benches who say they want to fight against this, stop this from happening. And again, these are people who often got legal background themselves. And then we're told there's some 40 Labour MPs who are women who are saying saying, no, this is about protecting women and girls, particularly victims of sexual assault and rape. But it's just, everyone touts this figure that, only 2 to 3%, I think it's now going up to around 5%, but around the, say, 3% mark of rape cases end in prosecution, end in someone actually, being found guilty and being punished. But I was looking at the stats of the cases that actually go to court, 60% are found guilty. There isn't an issue with juries not finding people guilty when these cases go to court, and especially when you consider so often these are crimes when it's, 2 people in a room alone or in a place alone where you don't have any extra evidence and it's one person's word against another. So what do they want? A 90% conviction rate without the evidence?
I mean, I think that is always the challenge, especially with rape cases, which is essentially that on the one hand you have an absolutely horrifying crime, on the other hand you have the very important principle of innocent until proven guilty and the burden of proof. And it is always very dangerous when you start talking about dismantling safeguards in order to drive conviction rates up. The thing that's really strange about this whole thing is that there is, in British the legal community, a thread of opposition to jury trials. It runs through Lord Denning before he was retired. It runs through a report in 2007 from the Home Office about racial bias in juries. And it is essentially that juries produce lots of adverse outcomes because there is a strong tendency towards racial bias, amongst other things. But not saying I agree with that or anything, but the point is that David Lammy would hate all of those reasons, right? None of the reasons that a certain section of the British legal opinion has opposed jury trials, this government would support. And so it is therefore impossible to work out why they're supporting this. Nothing that this government values is served by abolishing jury trials. It's not going to make anything quicker because the one thing there isn't a shortage of is 12 people who are called up for jury service.
No, exactly. You can't. By the way, you can't get out of it. But this is the thing. I'm so glad I didn't. Everyone said, "Well, you can get out of it." Nope, you can't. Do you think that this rebellion is going to lead to another U-turn, though? That's what everyone's expecting.
I mean, because
such a bad move.
It was not. I don't think it was in the manifesto, right?
No,
right.
Not.
And it won't. And again, whenever you're trying to get controversial stuff through the House of Commons, the critical thing for government is to be able to say, "Look, here's the tangible win." Right? And this isn't even going to produce those rape convictions.
No,
right?
Exactly.
There's nothing to gain from this.
It's just yet another utter mystery about this utterly incompetent government with this supremely incompetent Deputy Prime Minister, that's for sure. We didn't get a chance to talk to Matthew Scott about the Islamophobia thing, but there's just so much to talk about today. Up next, they're going to be talking about migration and the absolutely extraordinary revelation that 1 in 4 non-EU migrants who've settled in this country permanently are on benefits. They're on universal credit, which is weird because we were told these people were an economic benefit to us, weren't they? Oh, sorry, that's bigoted. It's a fact and it's bigoted. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, last few moments of the morning. This is Talk. Let's go straight to my next guest. He's Laurie Wastel, Associate Editor at the Daily Sceptic, and joins us to talk about, yet again, more figures on people who come to this country to make their life who are not perhaps an economic benefit to us. Laurie, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Julia.
It is extraordinary. This is the latest figures that are showing that migrants who are basically, they're non-EU arrivals, they've come here from farther overseas, but have been given permanent leave to remain, permanent settled status. 1 in 4, it's now estimated, are on universal credit, so on benefits, when we've been told again and again that mass migration, all these people, they're coming here and they're contributing and their economy is getting bigger because of them. But I'm not sure how it can be on that basis.
No, absolutely. And what we have to put that in context there is that that's actually about twice the rate of British nationals claiming universal credit. So this is an extraordinary number. Of course, yes, we're told that this is economic rocket fuel that is going to benefit our economy in various ways, that they're filling gaps in various sectors of the economy. Yeah. But it's really beginning to look like something of a Ponzi scheme, I'm afraid, Julia, because if you're bringing people in, but then they are not necessarily working and you're having to pay all these benefits out from the native taxpayer base, then how can that possibly be benefiting the fiscal situation in the long term? And so, I mean, that's... Yeah,
this is one of the things. This has been a debate. You know, and I'll write about this in my column for the Sun, and then we'll have loads of complaints, and I have to prove the figures on the official figures showing, you know, but there is no net economic benefit on average, you know, overall from the mass migration we have seen. But this is something that government after government has been telling us was a benefit. And even when Boris Johnson, you know, put rocket fuel under our net migration figures, one hopes at least he was told or thought that it was going to be an economic benefit to the country. But basically, once you do it per capita, every extra pound is a benefit, but once you add the number of people, then, you know, actually to the extra money, you realise actually overall we're getting poorer. But do you think the governments, you know, the Home Office, when they hand out these visas and when they give approval to people to stay, do you think they are aware of these figures, or have they just had their heads in the sand as well?
I think they certainly have for a very long time. I think increasingly we are sort of making them aware of it by drawing attention to this in so many ways. And it's certainly true that the way that bodies like the OBR and the Treasury have modelled this for a long time have been not really to look at the fiscal impact over the life cycle of these migrants, but merely perhaps the year they arrive, when maybe they aren't getting benefits yet, but they may be later on. So that's something that absolutely needs to be looked at.
We're well told we've got an ageing society. We need to bring people in. Of course, those people will also age. Will also claim it. But also, again, a lot of those stats have been based on the one person who's got the visa to come and work, even if they're often doing low-paid work. Maybe very vital work, working in the care sector, but nevertheless relatively low-paid work. But of course, if they are bringing in a wife or husband who doesn't work, and they've got 3 or 4 children who are going to school and clearly not working, they are, as a group, not a contributing, net contributing.
Absolutely, and that's why it is beginning to look like a Ponzi scheme. I think the government is becoming more aware of this. This is why Shabana Mahmood is talking about restricting the ability of in particular, the recent Boris wave of mass low-skilled migrants to get indefinite leave to remain. And that is very, very important. That's really a looming fiscal disaster, with lots more of these migrants, the 3.8 million or so let in during that period. And those
people would become eligible to apply for leave to remain. And then at that point, they become eligible for the same benefits as if they were British.
Quite. Well, we should say it is actually quite likely that many of them will already be finding ways to claim benefits through various sort of Homeless Persons Act and other housing benefits and things like this. So it's not completely true when some lefties will insist that there's sort of no recourse to public funds. Nevertheless, once you get that status of indefinite leave to remain, that does entitle you to a whole basket of goods, frankly. And this is why it's very important for the government to get a grip of this. But the difficulty that Shabana Mahmood the Home Secretary, is facing at the moment is that there will be a lot of Labour MPs who have a lot of migrants in their constituencies who are going to put a lot of pressure on her over this. So she needs to really hold her nerve here, because it's partly an issue for social cohesion and so on, as we've also heard this week from the government's new announcement about this. But equally, it's a real fiscal problem that is only going to get worse if it's not dealt with.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. Short but sweet, Laurie Wastell from the Daily Sceptic. Thank you for that. I mean, Henry Hill, the Tories didn't get on top of this for years, promising every single election. No government has been elected promising to keep upping immigration. The facts are out there. People are openly discussing it. The net financial hit we're taking. Is there any hope at all that Labour are getting on top of this? Because I would give that a big fat 0% chance.
I mean, Shabana Mahmood is trying. I think this is one of the ones where essentially the Labour Party's internal dynamics just will not allow it to move quickly enough.
Yeah, I don't even think there's the will to do it. I really, really don't. Labour backbenchers aren't going to agree to it. No. I think Shabana Mahmood talks a good game. At the end of the day, talking a good game ain't going to make a difference to how many taxes we're paying, or to social cohesion, by the way. So much more to come. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good afternoon to you. 2 minutes past 12 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Thank you, as always, for your company. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, thank you so much for joining us. If you've missed anything from the show, rip-roaring, fat-packed show, barely getting time to cover all the topics we want to cover, you can go to my YouTube page, The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up, we are going to be talking with some top guests in this hour. The latest on the Iran war. We're also going to be talking about MPs last night in the Commons are rejecting an Australia-style ban on social media for under 16. We'll take more of your calls. Lots coming in on that Islamophobia definition and the anti-Muslim hostility czar, and plenty more besides. Delighted to say, still joining me in the studio is journalist and political commentator Henry Hill. Good afternoon once again to you. I do just give you the numbers to get in touch if you want to get in touch to give us your thoughts, in particular on, as we're going to be discussing with our next guest, the latest on the Iran war. Donald Trump, the US president, saying it's going to end very soon, and then said, we've won, but we haven't won enough. and what that means, particularly for things like oil prices and inflation for this country. This, of course, as the Chancellor Rachel Reeves yesterday promised there would be some help as household bills threaten to rise. Of course, we end up paying for that help, by the way. It's all going to come on taxes. But what's your reaction to that? Plus, a lot of you getting in touch about Labour's new Islamophobia definition and the appointment of an anti-Muslim hostility czar. Will that threaten our freedom of speech? Tell us why it will. Tell us why it won't. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Right now, let's get straight to my first guest in this hour. Delighted to welcome the former head of MI6 Security Services, Sir Richard Dearlove. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Hi, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's talk about what Donald Trump's had to say and what he's had to write, because he seems to say something that's slightly different every few minutes or every few hours. He said the war in Iran will end very soon. He said it's ahead of schedule, and he said we've won already, but we haven't won enough. We're talking about it maybe going on for a few more weeks. What from your knowledge, and you've still got your fingers in various security pies, I'm sure. Is the war likely to end very soon? Are we looking at just a few weeks, or could this drag on longer, as the Iranian leadership has suggested?
I don't think we really know, and we certainly don't know listening to Trump. And I think he made this statement to calm markets and to force down the oil price, which has dropped quite significantly today. I mean, Hegseth, apparently the Secretary of State for War, we must now call him, is about to give a news conference. So maybe
we'll started actually.
We'll get more of a clue from that. But Trump's policy is to generate uncertainty. You're not sure what he's going to do next. So I think we shouldn't take it at face value. But the initial impact has been commercial in the last 24 hours, and I think that was the purpose of his statement.
Indeed, and with concerns around the world. And again, Donald Trump facing those midterm elections in November over the cost of living concern. And we saw the statement from our Chancellor, the Exchequer here in the UK. The Iranian leadership, well, not that we've seen the new leader, supreme leader yet, since his appointment, the son of the previous Ayatollah, they've said, they get to decide when the war ends rather than Iran. Are you concerned that a can of worms has been opened and it's going to move out of control? Because that's a lot of, it seems the polling for British people and indeed Americans as well is suggesting that, look, starting a war that we don't know how it's going to end, we don't know what the outcomes are, we're not even 100% sure what the war aims are, what would count as success or not. Are you concerned, and where do your concerns lie?
Well, I think there's a difference between what the United States want to achieve and what Israel wants to achieve. That's a fundamental problem. I mean, the Israelis just want a very weak Iran, which is not going to threaten the Middle East, not going to threaten them in particular. So they're looking at degrading the military capability, the economy, the oil, and putting Iran in a very weak and difficult position. I think the American objective, ideally, would be to see a different sort of regime. And I think the regime is in a very fragile state, but clearly it's not collapsing yet. I mean, the appointment of Khamenei's son is, doubling down on an extreme and very theocratic regime. But the idea that he's secure in that position, I think, is misleading. We'll have to see what happens over the coming days. But the problem inside Iran is there's no organized opposition. So the risks of a disintegration of the country are really pretty high. And there could be a successful outcome. I think the only way that might happen is if some Iranian generals from the military, not the IRGC, which tends to have a more nationalistic than theocratic reputation, split off from the government, and you get some sort of military initiative which removes Khamenei's son from power. But look, the chances of that happening are pretty small. It's a possibility. I don't think there's any other organization inside Iran which could throw the government over, unfortunately.
No. Well, not with 650,000 IRGC, highly ideological, theocratic and heavily armed soldiers and police officers. Do you think, I know you'll have done many an interview over the last week or so, but do you think that Donald Trump and the Israelis were right to launch these attacks on Iran? Will this make the Middle East, will this make the world a safer place?
Well, I think they were encouraged to do so by the Saudis privately. I mean, the Saudis, I think, took a rather different position. Maybe now they're all beginning to rethink what's happened because there was no quick, as it were, exit for this dreadful Iranian regime. The key question is, have they opened a can of worms which is going to get worse and worse, or have they achieved a strategic change? But we just don't know the answer to that yet. I think the disintegration chaos theory is probably at 75%, and the successful outcome is 20% or less. But you know, the next few days will be rather crucial.
Yeah.
And clearly the Iranian position is to try to outweight the US, where the war is very unpopular, close the Straits of Hormuz, cause as much chaos as possible, and basically see what happens next.
Well, indeed, and we'd seen that, Carson. You said that probably the focus for Donald Trump's remarks yesterday was after the oil was at $120 a barrel, gone back down to about $90 a barrel, but that big concern about that economic impact, even that phone call. And what do you make of the phone call with Vladimir Putin? Apparently an hour-long phone call where they discussed, Russian help. Wasn't that nice of Putin to help on those issues? And talking about basically getting rid of some of the sanctions on Russian oil, including the sale of Russian oil by a huge scale to India, which has been ongoing since the invasion of Ukraine and those sanctions across the world. Do you think that actually this is going to play out in perhaps ways that were not predicted by the Americans?
Well, it could be, but forcing up the price of oil, one of the main beneficiaries on the international market is going to be Putin with his shadow fleet of tankers. So he gets more revenue from selling or trying to sell Russian energy at a point, when the Middle East tap is being shut down. And I wish Trump wouldn't. Maybe it's an unfortunate, if I say play footsie with Putin, maybe it's more serious than that. But the fact that, he's prepared to consult Putin. I mean, Putin's actually been helping the Iranians with intelligence. So doesn't Trump get the message that this is not a regime which has anything other than a hostile attitude towards the US and let's say, the interests of the West?
Well, indeed. I want to come to that, but let me just read you some of the words from Pete Hegseth, the war secretary in the States. He's insisted the war ends at the Trump administration's own choosing. And speaking at this Pentagon briefing, he said Iran's neighbours and in some cases former allies in the Gulf have abandoned them. Their proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis and Hamas, are either broken, ineffective or on the sidelines. Iran stands alone and they are badly losing. On day 10 of Operation Epic Fury, we are winning with an overwhelming and unrelenting focus on our objectives, which are the same as the day I gave my first briefing here. And he says, we will not relent until the enemy is totally and decisively defeated. We do so on our timeline and at our own choosing. We're talking about things that kind of seems to be going further than what was initially said by Donald Trump.
But look, you can win militarily and lose politically.
Yeah.
And there are many examples of that. If you go back, let's say France's war in Algeria, for those who are historians. And I think the risk here is that you get a military victory, but you do not get a beneficial political outcome. And I think, we're on the cusp of that dilemma, and I'm not sure which way it's going to go. I'm not a prophet, I'm not a guru. You can observe the facts and try to guess what's going to happen. I think we all hope for a good outcome, but at the moment that looks parlous.
Was the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Sir Keir Starmer, was he right to basically stay out of this, refuse permission of Diego Garcia base, and just basically not get involved for whatever reasons, the disputes within the cabinet or whatever was going on? Was that the right decision in the end, do you think?
Definitely not. It was a strategic mistake.
Why?
Because the UK security is fundamentally tied to our relationship with the United States of America. And he could have, as it were, allowed use of those bases without supporting the attack on Iran. We have a treaty, and, which we then, he managed to sort of change the dialogue by making esoteric distinction between offense and defense. And 24 hours later, there's planes landing at Fairford and Diego Garcia is in use. But I mean, why couldn't he have the conviction and the confidence just to say right from the go, look, I disagree with the war, but our allies, America, are using their bases in the UK, and I have no intention of stopping that.
By all accounts, his position is quite a popular position with the British people. Do you think there is an issue where we have a lot of people now who say, well, I'm anti-war, I don't like war, war's a bad thing, people die in war, innocent people, children in a school, you know, it's a bad thing. And that permeates our public discussion, it permeates all the media questioning and the like. Do you think that there is a problem in Western societies where, let's be honest, an awful lot of people just don't get the realpolitik of dealing with the threat from regimes like Iran?
I'm afraid that is the case. And, you know, we're in a conflict with Russia. Russia believes they're at war with us. We have a grey warfare. It seems distant, but actually it's not. And I can understand the moral objection to the attack on Iran. But on the other hand, you know, this was one of the most brutal and ghastly regimes the world has seen in recent times. And, you know, maybe the outcome in time will be beneficial. But I think there is a sort of resistance. We've got used, you know, to a prolonged period of peace. We've run down our armed forces. We don't have conscription any longer. And a lot of people just do not understand the geopolitics of our situation and the threats to this nation and the fact that the world is changing. It's becoming a much more dangerous place. And, you know, we need to get our act together and to think carefully about what our strategic interests are.
How much damage has been done to Britain's reputation by the fact that we don't have a ship in our port in Bahrain, we didn't have a frigate in the Middle East, sorry, in the Mediterranean. HMS Dragon is finally, apparently in a few days' time, going to be ready to go out. It's going to take a week to get there. We've had the French basically having to defend our military base in Cyprus. The French are sending a whole string of warships out to try and protect the Strait of Hormuz. Have we rather undermined our position on the world stage by our absolute lack of battle readiness?
Well, we've been delivered a severe lesson in the crisis. You find out what the problems are, which you might be hidden at other times. We have allowed the Navy in particular to be dreadfully run down. And the problem is ship maintenance. And there are a lot of, the vessels that the Navy had that couldn't be deployed because they're not in proper working order. All you have to look, if you add up the National Health Service, the welfare bill, and what the money that the government pays on interest on its debt, that sum is 7 times larger than the defense budget of the United Kingdom. And the first responsibility of a government of the United Kingdom is the security of the realm. And we have to, as it were, make some fundamental changes. And this government, and to be fair to them, previous Conservative governments have been seriously neglectful. It's the sort of Davos view of the world that you can talk about your problems, you don't need armed forces. This is complete rubbish. Times are changing and defence needs to be put first. I'm sorry to say it, even above the National Health Service.
Well, again, that's, as you say, the first duty of a government. Can I just ask you just finally about the threats from Iran to us? I mean, not just people, Brits in the Middle East or to our oil supplies and to our economy from that, but actually the threats that we faced here on British homeland. So we're told that some of the security forces of authorities have managed to prevent some 20 Iran-backed, Iran-funded, Iran-directed terror attacks on this territory. There's concern now that Iran is activating sleeper cells within Western nations, including Britain, ready to attack. How concerned should we be about our safety here at home?
Well, that's the way that Iran can hit us, through conspiracies to commit terrorism and we know from what the security have said about these sorts of plots over the past year to 18 months, 2 years, that there are cells that they are trying to activate in the UK. We just recently had an arrest in London, I think, of an ongoing investigation where they picked up, I think, 3 people of Iranian origin who were wrecking Jewish sites in London. Yeah, it's a problem. I think that we are fortunate that we have a very strong security service that has not been run down. And the intelligence and security community, GCHQ and my former service, I think to an extent are on top of these problems. But, you know, you have to be successful every day to prevent them. And that is a huge challenge because you're prioritizing between different targets, different threats, threat levels, individuals. And the people sitting on the desks have to make some very, you know, doing the analysis and looking at these issues, have to make some very tough choices. Where's the biggest threat coming from? Should they arrest someone? Should they let it run? So at the moment, I'm hoping that there's a team of very devoted and committed people looking at these problems and working out how to protect us.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove there. Thank you for that. Henry Hill, always really interesting to hear from people who, you know what's really going on. I dread to think of the things that Sir Richard knows that we'll never know. We might, well, maybe we'll find out in 30 to 50 years, but the stuff that's happened that we'll never, ever be told about. And when he says, you know, we got to work on our defences, our security, we've had so many former defence chiefs, defence secretaries, you know, former security service chiefs, you know, explaining this, and that keeps us safe in our homes as well as on our borders and well as abroad, doesn't it? Yeah, and it's not even, you're entirely right, but it's not even just the secret stuff that the security services know, it's also just basic maths, right? The fact that we've got journalists now, not journalists, generals now talking about conscription, right? Yeah. Politicians keep hating that, they keep trying to shut it down, but you know why? There was half of Europe's got conscription. There was a report from the US Army War College in 2023, right, based on the Ukraine war, first big peer military war in a long time. They estimated that if the US got involved in a conflict of that intensity on the ground, 50,000 casualties in 2 weeks. Yeah. US military can't sustain it. Our military. They make you big. They've had Americans have had 7 casualties, and it's front page news. And we're talking about whether or not America will win in Iran. You can't properly win in the way that people are thinking about. You can't win a war from the air, right? No. So is Trump prepared to go in? I don't think he is. Well, it's very interesting. Pete Hegseth, the War Secretary, has just said, he said that American military intervention in the Middle East is not even close to the nation building under George Bush Jr. And George W. Bush and Barack Obama. He said the Trump administration will not let that happen. This is not 2003. He said this is not endless nation building under those types of quagmires we saw under Bush or Obama. It's not even close. Our generation of soldiers will not let that happen again, nor will this president. And he said this, who very clearly ran against these kinds of never-ending, nebulously scoped missions. Those days are dead. Instead, we're winning decisively with brutal efficiency, total air dominance, and an unbreakable will to accomplish the president's objectives. Basically said also we'll never allow Iran to get a nuclear bomb. But basically saying, you know what? I mean, and this is something that Donald Trump has said very clearly. And there's always been an argument for this, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, or elsewhere. It's like, you know what? I mean, so in Venezuela. Don't really care about your people. Don't really care how you treat the people of Iran or Venezuela or anywhere else. If you become a problem for us, we're going to take you out. And you can put in whoever you want. But if they become a problem for us, we're going to take you out. And that is, you know, that is proper flexing of the arms. We're not going to bring in democracy. We're not going to, you know, try and make you in our likeness. We don't care about, I mean, you could argue that morally, you know, should you care? Maybe, you know, I think Iran, you've got a better chance of bringing in democracy than you have in Iraq. I mean, it's very highly educated, sophisticated, secular. 70% of Iran people are secular, you know, nationally coherent. You know, you've got, it's a very, very, very different kettle of fish than Iraq. But basically, it's not our problem. It's just not our problem. We don't have to see an ally coming up in the image of Britain or America. You just can't be our problem anymore. And I've got to be honest with you, I kind of like that approach. I mean, it's much more like what happened during the Cold War, right? Which is that you would have often both Cold War parties, but America kind of infamously would get involved in other countries, and the goal was not to turn it into a new America, but to help the people of that country. It was very often that you put in a military junta or something, right? But the whole point was it was a very narrow national security interpretation, and whatever you think of that ethically,
it is a much more achievable objective than we're going to turn Afghanistan into the most progressive democracy on earth.
and then police it forevermore. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this. Give us a call. 12:23 is the time. 0344 499 1000. Got lots of texts and tweets and messages I want to get to, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything Sir Richard Deal I've had to say, what Pete Hegseth, the US War Secretary. That's ridiculous, War Secretary.
We used to have one.
We used to have, during the war.
No, but for a very long time.
Was it they still called? Okay. That's what your job
Ministry of Defence is a
But war is a tool of
euphemism.
diplomacy as part of, which is to defend your country. But anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And also, of course, lots of your calls still coming in about Islamophobia and this new threat. This new threat to freedom of speech, apparently, which we are worried about from the anti-Muslim hostility czar and all these measures, which again, not crimes, just like non-crime hate incidents, and yet 60 people a day have been arrested in recent years for non-crime hate incidents. Not quite sure how you can get arrested for something that's not a crime, but I have a funny feeling we're going to see a lot of people getting arrested for apparently anti-Muslim hostility. What does hostility even mean? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. To me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:27 is the time. Just to bring you up to date on what has been said by Pete Hegseth. He's the US Secretary of War. He's been talking about how this is not a nation-building exercise. It's not Iraq or Afghanistan and Bush or Obama. This hostility in Iran is all about basically, just stopping Iran being a threat, getting nuclear weapons and the like. He said they will never allow Iran a nuclear bomb, and he's also said that basically this war will end at the Trump administration's Iran's own choosing, the Iranian leadership having said, I think we get a say in this as well, which, of course, they do. Your thoughts on this? You've been getting in touch. Paul says, I fear a global superpower will not change its plans because Brits have to pay more for butter down the shop. This is true, but I'd like to point out, as you know, let's point out that Trump will change his plans when it's affecting Americans and what they're having to pay. Jamie says, if only we had a British government to protect us. Teflon Don says, Neil is a proven liar. He's lying, says Jimmy, just wants to calm fear in the oil markets. Yeah, there's no doubt at all. The statement he made yesterday in the phone call with Putin was about that. I haven't got a problem with that. I mean, you know, part of warfare now is not just drones and missiles and bombs. It is economic warfare. It's the price of oil. It's, you know, everything else. Kevin says, I present the Ukraine war as evidence for Donald Trump's ability to end wars. That was a 24-hour job, didn't happen. He has no plans, says Fred. He's a complete lunatic. Gary says, Starmer is pathetic. I back Trump. Teach those terrorists a lesson in the name of all the innocent people that they have slaughtered. Trump, says Adrian, isn't in the driving seat. The war will end when Iran wants it to. What do you say to all of that, Henry Hill?
I mean, the war will end when Iran wants it to. I suppose what the previous guest mentioned is the most interesting thing, which is that unless America is willing to go in on the ground... Yeah. Then ultimately that isn't the idea that it will only end when Iran decides it will is entirely correct, because you can't end a war from the air unless the opponent.
Well, can you if you're totally and utterly taken away Iran's capability to send missiles and drones to its
right? This is actually been a problem throughout history.
No,
right?
Do they need to surrender? They just basically you can no longer wage war against your Middle East neighbours.
But so the difficulty with that is that yes, you can do that to Iran's conventional capacity, right? You can do it to its big missiles and all the rest of it. But the drones. Actually, this is the
drones have been such a game changer, haven't they?
This is the problem. This is the same with the Houthis. Actually, manufacturing drones can be done very cheaply in all sorts of decentralised locations. They can be moved quietly. They can be launched and piloted without the kind of big infrastructure which you need to mount a conventional campaign, which America can demolish without setting foot in Iran, right? And actually, given, as you've mentioned, the IRGC, hundreds of thousands of fanatical fighters, what is needed if America's not going to go in, and frankly, even if it is what the previous guest mentioned, which is for some faction of the Iranian regime, probably the military, the conventional military, to turn against the Islamic Republic. Now, a few days ago, there were a few interesting signs that bits of this might be happening. There was evidence that the regular army was refusing orders from the IRGC in places and refusing to come out of barracks. But without that...
Yeah. People need to know it's safe. I mean, I've got to be honest with you. I'm a bit of a stroppy old thing. I'm not sure I'd be on the streets of Iran, you know, even in January, you know, trying to end the government when you know you're likely to get machine gunned to death. Simple as that. Lots of you getting in touch also about this government's new Islamophobia definition and the anti-Muslim hostilities are. I think rather embarrassing. We did actually write in our question, anti-Muslims are. It's not that. It's anti-Muslim hostilities are. Do feel we need to stress that. And whether this is a threat to freedom of speech. Jane says, of course it threatens free speech. It's meant to. Interesting point. That's the whole point of it. We've already seen the gradual Islamification of the UK, and we know how that ends. Look at Iran before the 79 revolution. Kevin says Starmer unashamedly seeks support for this from this 7th century religion that routinely stones women to death in the name of Allah. He then wonders why we object to his insane plan to outlaw any criticism of Islam via his new definition of Islamophobia. Yeah, see, I think you have the right to criticise any religion. I mean, you know, I brought up, you know, The Life of Brian was, you know, the ultimate film of my generation. You should be able to criticise any religion, any religious beliefs. I think religious clothing, religious views, and I think people who use their religion as a justification for any actions. I think all of those things are absolutely should be up for debate. Tim says we already have laws that encompass hatred and harassment. Islam needs to bow to Western liberal values in the West, not the other way around. I agree with that. I really do. I do. People say Islam is incompatible with the West. I think Islam, as followed, and the strictest interpretation, is absolutely incompatible in terms of liberal values of equality and freedom of choice, who you marry, how you have faith, and how you and whether you leave your faith or not. Absolutely. I mean, if you want to live in the West, and you want to live in Britain, those are the laws. No Sharia law, no, that's it. Again, I don't even know why that's up for debate. Eric says this government exists to repress, control, and remove all freedoms. Those who follow Islam will be the only ones to have freedoms, or the men at least. The women not so much. A lot of anger out there, Henry.
Yeah, and perfectly understandably for all the reasons that we've discussed over the last couple of hours. People rightfully, especially in a society, in a state that considers itself to be liberal, they expect equality under the law, right? And
you and your old-fashioned ideas.
And they expect the ability to criticise, and including criticise offensively, it's important to say, religions. Right, a religion is not a.
You're allowed to mock.
Right, the Catholic Church is mocked all the time. Right, nobody seems to think it's outrageous to make offensive, quote unquote, again scare quotes for the listeners, about Christians. Right, the Book of Mormon. I don't imagine that the Mormon Church particularly likes the Book of Mormon. It's a massive smash hit stage play. Right, and it should be. It is important that you protect the right of people to do that about Islam as well. And I think that the critical thing to stress is, because we often talk about, the lots of things about Islam that are outrageous, but real free speech is that you have to be able to at least say things that,
other people don't like.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to go to a break in a couple of moments. We're going to talk to our next guest, his former British ambassador to Iran, Sir Richard Dalton. First up, though, we're giving you the chance to win 2 hospitality tickets to the British Grand Prix on Sunday, the 5th of July. That's with the full Racing Green trackside experience. This is the ultimate setup for a race day. You get exclusive grandstand seats at the Loop and Village Corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock, access to the hospitality shuttle bus for easy on-site transport, racing simulators, live music between sessions, all-day street food and an open bar. Listen up to find out how you could be in with a chance to win.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Yep, that's the perfect Silverstone race day experience for any F1 fan, so don't miss out. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, more on Iran. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Still with me, political commentator and journalist Henry Hill. Delighted to be joined right now by the former British ambassador to Iran from 2002 to 2006, Sir Richard Dalton. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Thank you.
We've had some very esteemed Sir Richards on the show in this hour. Thank you very much for joining us. Just want to ask you, first of all, what you make of what Pete Hegseth, the US Secretary for War, has been saying, that war is going to end in Iran when Americans say so, at the Trump administration's own choosing. He said that Iran has made a big mistake by targeting its neighbours. I think many of them were rather surprised to find missiles raining down on them, UAE, Qatar and others. And he said that basically this was not going to be anything like what happened under Bush and Obama, where he said the endless nation building under those types of quagmires we saw under Bush and Obama, not even close. Basically saying, look, this is about not letting Iran get a nuclear war. We're not going to build a nation. We're not going to be putting troops on the ground to, help form that nation. We're basically going to be in and out. What do you make of that?
Well, I think the world can do without this kind of yeehaw exceptionalism, this vainglorious that has, under Trump, attacked more countries than any other previous president. I think we need sober analysis. We need good plans. We need legal bases for action. I support the British government position on all those matters. And I don't know when this war will end. We get such confusing signals. One moment Trump says, yes, it's going to end soon. And then Hegseth says there's no date, it's going to end when we want it to end. The Iranians say, well, hold on, you attacked us. So we have a say on when it ends. So I'm afraid the present situation is one of confusion. The salient fact is, though, that the United States and Israel have set about destroying Iran. And according to Trump, that objective has been achieved. He said, we have destroyed a country. So I think now is the time for all countries who are impacted by this illegal war to get together and demand de-escalation and a ceasefire.
Okay.
And Britain should be in the forefront of that effort.
It's interesting. I mean, you say this is an illegal war. We've had many on the Labour backbenchers and arguing this case. Why on earth do you think this is an illegal war when Iran has declared war on Israel, declared war against America, issued terrorist attacks on in both countries, been funding terror and war aims against both countries for many years? How on earth could defensive actions to prevent that from happening be an illegal war?
Well, you're telling lies. Iran has not declared war on the United States. There was no
They've pledged the destruction. The Iranian regime has pledged the destruction of America.
There was no imminent threat against the United States. Now, I do not believe in pacifism. I do believe that war can be justified, but just the same way we declared that there was no legal basis for Putin's invasion of Ukraine, there is no legal basis.
That's not the same at all. Ukraine was not a threat. Ukraine had not threatened Russia. We know that the Iranian regime, and again, I think we should talk about the Iranian regime rather than Iran. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're very aware of your expertise, the difference between those things. They've made it very, very clear. Death to America is a bit of a clue, isn't it? Death to Israel. I mean, why should either America, I mean, they were clearly trying to build a nuclear weapon. The threat to Israel as an ally of America was
lie. They were not clearly building a nuclear weapon. That is a lie. There has no evidence been produced that that was going to happen. Trump's excuse that there would be a nuclear weapon in a fortnight is a lie.
Well, again, I agree with you in terms of how much can we trust what Donald Trump has to say on these things. Israel was certainly very much of the view that we know that it's well documented that Iran has been trying to develop nuclear weapons. They've been in long-term negotiations, long-term dispute with all the International Atomic Energy Authority over being able to actually look at what they're actually doing. Because for some reason, despite being a major oil producer, they're of the view they desperately need to have the uranium developed to a level where far beyond nuclear power capacity and into nuclear weapon capacity. I don't think it's credible to say.
You are grossly distorting the evidence. You are out of your depth in considering the detail of this subject. Don't smirk at me like that.
I'm not smirking at you. I'm finding it absolutely extraordinary that anyone can even question that.
I shall tell you, the International Atomic Agency, in one of its most recent pronouncements, said that it had not detected any evidence of an active nuclear weapons program. Now, yes, they had enriched uranium to a dangerous level.
Why?
But their policy of not developing a nuclear weapon has been consistently stated. And the allegation, oh, come on.
No, but the Iranian Ayatollah stating they're not developing a nuclear weapon, but they've enriched uranium to a point which is way beyond the need for nuclear power. It is only needed for a weaponry. And you think, they're absolutely telling the truth.
We were in the middle of an active and successful negotiation to deal with that problem. So, yet again, United States and Israel have made the security of the world worse by the way they behave. They have done great damage to the nuclear non-proliferation regime, which I believe even talk would endorse in order to reduce the number of countries who have nuclear weapons. But why do you think nations now are going to trust the United States' word? Why do you think they will be prepared simply to have conventional weaponry when they face such odds all over the world against their adversaries? They will go the nuclear route, like Kim Jong-un
we know lots of countries
in North Korea.
Well, we know lots of countries have done that, don't we?
History, that will be in history, connected to the unjustified destruction of Iran on false pretexts.
Okay. Again, I couldn't disagree with you more or all of that, but you talk about the destruction of Iran. Is it not the case that actually these have been highly targeted, military strikes? They've not been targeting civilians, and we still don't know the truth about that girls' school next to an IRGC facility, who was responsible for that. But I doubt very much it would have been targeted deliberately by the US force, unknowingly by the US forces. We're not seeing the destruction of Iran. That's quite the opposite from what we're seeing from reports, that actually these are highly targeted military targets, leadership targets, rather than the actual, the people themselves, their energy facilities, their water desalination and the like.
You're just putting lipstick on the pig. The fact is, Trump says we are destroying Iran. Moreover, the gross environmental crime of attacking all those oil facilities around Tehran is but one example. They are attacking fire stations, police stations. 12 hospitals, according to the WHO, have been damaged. And yes, 168 children were killed, maybe by mistake. But they set out to provoke state failure in that country.
What's wrong with that, given the state, the regime that runs that state? A state that has threatened the rest of the world, threatened its neighbours, threatens the existence of Israel and every Jew in Israel, threatened America, has been behind terror attacks and threats in this country, has been funding this, basic chaos around the Middle East for decades now, that slaughters its own young people in the street, possibly 30, 40,000, even more than that, simply for asking, to have basic civil rights and women not to have to cover their hair. Why wouldn't it be the moral and good thing to try and oust that regime?
Well, they're going rather further than ousting that regime, are they not? They are trying to destroy the viability of the Iranian state. They are risking a breakup of the country into warring parties. They are risking leaving behind the Islamic Republic in a more ferocious state of mind. Now, I'm not justifying the 4 or 5 issues in which we have, and I personally conducted, actions against in connection with Iranian policy. But responsible governments have to look at the range of possible consequences and to decide whether what they intend to do is too risky or acceptable. Now, the first test is international law. The second test is whether you're going to leave Iran in a worse position and the international community in a worse position, as the United States did in attacking Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. The United States' record in the Middle East is appalling, quite apart from arming and conniving at genocide in Gaza.
Oh, well, I'm going to end that now. Mr. Richard, we're out of time anyway. There was no genocide in Gaza. I'm genuinely, with all due respect to you, sir, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed by my own government, although the government actually even admits, but a lot of the ministers, that a former British ambassador in Iran could claim that there was genocide in Gaza, when even the stats given by Hamas themselves do not even remotely suggest there was any attempt or certainly the achievement of genocide in Gaza. That's an absolute nonsense, with all due respect.
I have a right to reply to that.
Very
remark.
quickly, if you could, Sir Richard.
Your opinion
Not
is
opinion.
contradicted by a great many international, including Jewish experts in genocide.
Yeah,
It's
there are
not a
lots of
question
experts in
number,
genocide would say very
it's a
different.
question of the effect. The point is, Iran was contained. This war was unnecessary.
Okay. I disagree with that. I'd love you to come back. We've got a bit more time and we can talk a bit more longer about this. It's really interesting to do it. I say I wasn't smirking at all. I was just quite stunned by some of your opinions. But Sir Richard Holt, former British ambassador to Iran from 2002 for 4 years. Henry Hill, your response to what Sir Richard had to say?
Which bit? I suppose the thing whenever I hear commentary like that is somebody's like, I'm not a pacifist and I support war in principle, but X, Y, Z. But then you actually listen to his objections and it's, well, how do you fight a war without hurting anyone, without blowing anything up? Right? Like, this is not the 19th century. The Iranian military is not going to form up on the battlefield so that the Americans can form up and have a classical sort of Napoleonic style battle. This is what war looks like now. Degrading the capacity of the state to resist is what warfare is. And when I think it's those objections which make me only suspect, obviously I don't know his mind, that this thing about I believe in war being justifiable in theory is a smokescreen.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who just think war's never justifiable. Again, and things are going to be messy. I think things will be a lot messier if the Iranian Ayatollahs set off a nuclear weapon in the Middle East. I'm sorry, I think that would be a bit messier, going out on a limb.
And he said, you know, there was no direct imminent threat to the US. Well, there is one to Israel.
Yeah,
and America is an Israeli ally.
Exactly. 12:49 is the time. Absolutely fascinating conversation. Now, up next, we're going to be talking about MPs voting yesterday to reject plans for a ban on social media for under 16s, which is what's happened in Australia. But should we bring such a ban in? We'll talk to the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, Chris McGovern, up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk. 12:52 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest now to talk about, well, MPs voting yesterday to reject an Australia-style ban on social media for under-16s. Chris McGovern is the chairman of the Campaign for Real Education and joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Chris.
Good afternoon, Julia.
And now, I mean, you and I have discussed this before. Remind our audience that whether, you support what Australia is doing or not.
We very strongly support what Australia is doing, not just Australia, but 25% of countries around the world, including local neighbours like France and Denmark and so forth. So, yeah, we have a problem here of addiction, mental health, etc. And when people have an addiction, we try to break that addiction. But look, the House of Lords has already voted that we should ban social media sites for under-16s. And I'm sure when after they've exhausted every other possibility, the House of Commons will make the same decision eventually. But look, it's a slow process. They're slow learners. We're damaging our children.
I mean, I would say we should have slow processes. General rule, laws made, knee-jerk are often not very good laws. But there was a lot of talk from the government. There was to be a wait and see. We'll see what the Australians do and see how that works out and how people can get around it. We've had organisations like, the NSPCC and others say, look, we're just concerned that children who are not allowed to go on social media, they're just going to go into darker, more dangerous corners of the internet. We're better off kind of regulating what they can see on these sites. And we've certainly seen this in Australia where, look, kids can get around this stuff much better than their parents could ever, or their teachers could ever understand how they do it. They're using VPNs or the like, and they're able to go on and see stuff that frankly is even more terrifying than the stuff that's going on social media. Isn't it better for us to have more regulation of so you buy a phone for your kid is on social media, that kid's account, and parents need to be much stricter about this. We need some parenting going on, literally, controlling if your kid's account, then the algorithms and all the stuff, they need to be much more tightly controlled. Wouldn't that be a safer way of dealing with this?
No, it probably wouldn't work either. Look, we need to support. Well, because as you say, children will generally speaking have many children run their parents. Many children, adults these days, I think, are afraid to stand up to their kids.
I agree with you.
And it is also true, I think, that yes, you can ban things and the ban doesn't work. We ban alcohol for under 18s, and we ban murder. It doesn't work, of course, but it sends the right signal. And on the whole, it will work for most children. And the message parents want to hear, and this is what the Australian Prime Minister is saying, we need to back our parents. Parents need to say to their kids, look, you can't go onto social media because the law says you mustn't. That gives parents some backing. Yeah. If I had my way on this, I would ban ownership of mobile phones for under 18s. That would solve the problem. Yes, some would get around it.
So when you see a kid on it, of course, a lot of parents want their kids to be on their mobile phones because it keeps them quiet.
It does. That's the drug, isn't it? That is the danger, of course. We know that the mobile technology has many wonderful sides to it, but it also reduces human communication. Yeah. Scientists have shown us that the brains of children, the brains can be photographed, and they are changing. We don't know what we're doing in this area, but slowly the world is awakening up to the problem. We are damaging our children. It's a child protection issue, Julia. Yeah. And look, we can go over the top. When I say we should ban ownership, that's the big step, but it takes a lot of courage to do that.
But that's at least a very clear signal. I mean, again, I'm with you in terms of, I think parenting is a big issue. I think schools that don't ban phones in lessons and the like, and there is this concern. I do think there's a difference between what we control and what the freedoms that an adult has and what a child has. There has been that concern, though, that you have this sudden drop. Now, look, I don't agree kids being allowed to vote at the age of 16. Why? Because they're kids, they're not adults. But this idea that, say, it's suddenly at 16, right, well, now you can look at social media and now you can vote and now you can do all this. And actually, they're still not equipped at 16 to deal with it, but you've got this sudden cliff edge drop. But I suppose you could make that argument about alcohol and cigarettes and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, children have to be introduced to these things eventually. But there's a real problem here. It is a child protection issue. And people say, look, it's really difficult to do this. Why should we not do it because it's difficult? We could stop children running into the middle of the road to hit by a car or a lorry, when sometimes parents will smack their legs for doing that. Yeah. It's in the children's interest. We must have confidence. Adults need to have confidence that children don't always know best. And as for the voting age at 16, that I think is absurd. We should raise the voting age, not lower it.
I mean, we're certainly on the same page on that. But the government has said, look, they're going to wait and see what happens. They've got a consultation out. Do you think that eventually pretty much all Western countries are going to end up going this way? Bearing in mind that the bosses of the social media companies don't let their own kids onto these algorithms.
They don't. Yeah, and this is the point I made many times. The bosses of the internet companies, they don't allow their own kids into it. Not just the Western countries will ban it. I think the whole world will move in that direction. There's a special place in hell for those people who can't make a decision. Read Dante. In fairness, one or two of your listeners might read that. Those are the people who just chased the flag. They couldn't make up their minds. They're damned forever.
Okay. Chris McGovern, Chairman of the Campaign for Education, thank you very much. Never sits on the fences on Chris. Henry Hill, I mean, what do you think of this? Because my only real concern, I really think kids need to be protected from this stuff. I don't know why we can't make the social media companies be more responsible, even for adults, but I also want to protect freedom of access and freedom of speech for adults.
And that is, of course, the danger is once you set up these mechanisms of control, which are always justified with the most sympathetic possible
children,
case, then the tendency to use them is always there.
The mission creep, you'll end up with controls on everybody seeing stuff. And again, then you don't get discussions about things like COVID or masks or lockdowns or trans people not actually being the sex they claim to be, climate change. I mean, this is the thing. People say social media is